That's what we always do.
Good morning, everybody. We're going to try to get started in about a minute here, so if you would move towards your seats, please.
Be an interesting race with
Well, good morning, everybody, and welcome to our regular meeting of the Pucks Peak Area Council of Governments, December. Great to have everybody here. I appreciate your engagement in important areas for the region. We do have a quorum this morning. We'll begin with introductions. I'm Norm Steen, Teller County Commissioner, currently serving as your chair. Jill?
Jill Gabler, Colorado Springs.
Sharon Thompson, City Fountain.
Yolanda Avila, Colorado Springs.
Manny Pico, Colorado Springs.
Ken Jury, Manitou Springs. I'd also like to introduce the mayor-elect of Manitou Springs, John Graham.
There he is.
We'll be joining you next month.
Okay, very good.
Thank you, Mayor.
Gary Faust, Palmer Lake.
Dick Elsner, Park County.
Ron Jevry, Director of Staff, 50th Space Wing, Schriever Air Force Base.
Sam Johnson, Peterson Air Force Base. Rod Bearden, United States Air Force Academy.
Keith Klein, Military Affairs Council and Defense Mission Task Force.
Bruce Davis, City of Victor.
Karen Rowe, CDOT. Cami Bremer, El Paso County.
Don Wilson, Town of Monument.
Andy Gunning, PPACG.
And good morning, Neil Levy, Woodland Park.
Great. Well, we have a fairly full agenda, as has been our habit, I guess, lately. We have 3 action items today. Do we have an agenda before us? Is there a motion to approve the agenda, please?
So moved.
A motion. Is there a second? A motion, a second. Discussion. All those in favor say aye.
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 Opposed, nay. Thank you. Public comments. We'll begin with kind of a sad note. We're going to be saying farewell to Mayor Ken Jury. Ken, did you know that?
I did.
Okay. Good. Well,
Bittersweet.
it is bittersweet. I just want to say, Ken, how much we appreciate your engagement. Have been always appreciate your thoughtful, supportive, constructive comments, everything you've done here. Really appreciate your partnership, your engagement, and really thank you for everything that you've done. Any of the members of the board may make any comments? Andy?
It's been a pleasure working with you, and best of luck, and I know you've got a party planned as soon as you can.
Sure. Jill?
Mayor, it's been a pleasure working with you, and I'm going to miss you dearly, and hopefully I'll still see you on the trails.
Absolutely.
On the trail. Okay.
Around the river.
Yeah. Yolanda?
Ken, it's been really good to know you, and I like a lot of your philosophies that you brought to the table here at PPACG, and I appreciate that. Thank you.
Neil?
Yeah, and for me, Ken, this whole thing for me is always about relationships, and philosophy and all those things always take a back seat, and the way you do things is what's always impressed me, and your approach and your demeanor and your willingness to, to be all-inclusive and to listen to everybody around the table, and I think that's what makes this group special, and so thank you for your leadership. It's been tremendous. Great opportunity and new friend in my life.
Well, can we have a presentation on behalf of the Board of Directors to you? Want to come on up, please?
Is this a photo op?
Yeah. Sure. Yeah, well. So, it probably looks familiar.
Isn't that?
Yeah.
So, just a bit.
Are you going to take a picture?
Yeah, we're going to take a picture.
Great, thank you.
Yeah. Perfect. Thanks.
Thank you. All the best to you. Thank you, Mark. Appreciate it.
Our second public comment item 3B, is Census 2020 preparation. And another face many of us will recognize. Mr. Griffin, come on up, please.
Hi, Murph. How are you, sir? Good to see you.
Yeah. Center button.
There we go. Okay. Good morning, everybody. I appreciate you letting me come and talk to you. Ken, you did a great job as manager of, or the mayor of Manitou, and my wife still loves the decorations you have on the new lights down on Manitou Avenue, so it's beautiful. But since I left City Council in April, I've been chairing the 2020 Complete Count Census Committee. I'm going to pass out some cards. If you could pass these around, I'd appreciate it if each one of you would take one. It'd be very appreciative. I'll make this as brief as I can, but most people in the community and basically in the country don't realize the significance of the census. The details related to the census is that almost all of our infrastructure that comes from the federal government, all of our redistricting, both at the state, federal, and in Colorado Springs, our council districts and county commissioners are based upon the census. And when it comes to dollars that come to us for roads and infrastructures from the federal government, it's based on the census. When it comes to medical benefits, it comes from the census. When it comes to education in our schools, those dollars come from the census. So it's critical that we deal with this. In 2010, we missed, the estimate is 7% of the population. And that's really significant because it's about $2,500 per person per year. To give you try to give you a scope of the situation, in 2018, the amount of federal dollars that came to our community, and when I say our community, I'm talking about El Paso and Teller counties, the Pikes Peak region. It was $13 billion. That's a B, not an M. That's $13 billion. And so it's critical that we deal with this. It's used for reapportionment of the State House of Representatives, or the county commissioners, the state senate, or the city council districts, and it affects the federal funds. The other information I want to deal with is that in El Paso County in 2018, the amount of dollars that it affected El Paso County was about $1.9 million. The amount that it affected Teller County, because it's a smaller population, is about $66,000. And so it's really, really critical that we deal with this. One of the problems that we have is getting the word out, because a lot of people aren't getting counted, like the 7%. That's about 45,000 individuals that didn't get counted in 2010. And we would like it to be a very complete count. We have representatives from every community in Teller County and El Paso County on the committee that are helping us with it. And but the areas where we had the most problems was children under 5. Some of the parents might have a newborn baby, and they didn't count them. Well, they should. They just didn't know. And so we had a major problem with children under 5. So we're dealing with a lot of the preschools and with a lot of those types of areas, child care areas, to help educate the community that this is important, that we talk about this. Also, the other areas that was renters, military, Hispanics and some African Americans, although the African Americans were the least problem with that. But in some of the situations, we, especially in the military, and I'm going to use my daughter as an example. My daughter is an Air Force Academy graduate, and she's now stationed at the Pentagon, she and her husband, but they own a house here in Colorado Springs. So do they fill it out as living here in Colorado Springs, or do they fill it out as living in Alexandria, Virginia? Well, it's where you live on April 1st, 2020. So they need to fill it out in Alexandria, Virginia. But then it gets to be a problem when you get into higher education in colleges. So if the primary residence on April 1st is your home and it's a child in college, then you count them in your home. If they're living in an apartment or their primary residence is in a different state, they should count there. So it's where you're living, where your primary residence is on April 1st. And you can see that it causes some problems. But the amount of dollars involved that comes back to our communities is about $2,500 per person. So it's really significant. And when you measure $2,500 per person times 7% of our population, you're talking about big money that we missed, that could have been here. Now, this isn't dollars we're taking from other communities. This is dollars that you paid in your federal taxes that are coming back and supposed to come back here. And so we're only getting what we're rightly deserve. And it's important for us to do this. One of the other things is that in 2018, in July of 2018, they did a population estimate. And in 2018, we actually have in Teller, the estimate is that between Teller and El Paso County, we have enough combined population to have our own federal representative. So that matters, that we be represented well. Now, I don't know if we'll get that. Andy and I have talked about that, but at least we'll have good argument for that. But there is pretty certain in Colorado that there will be another representative. The other thing that we need to let you know, tell you, Jessica told me I had 5 to 7 minutes, and for a former politician, that's really hard. This one's going to be an easy opportunity. It only takes about 2 minutes to fill out the survey. And this year, you can do it online. You can do it using your smartphone. You can do it over the phone, or you can fill out a paper form. Now, we'll start with that. The census day is April 1, 2020. And that's when you'll hear major pushes to fill those forms out. It only takes about 2 minutes, as I said, to do that. The other thing is that there's a lot of people that are concerned that if they fill out the census, if they're undocumented, they could be deported. Actually, it's extremely safe. And we need to make that clear to everybody. Yolanda has been helpful with us in the southeast portion of Colorado Springs. But what a lot of people don't understand, federal law prohibits the census information from being distributed to the FBI, the CIA, immigration, local police. It's a $250,000 fine if you do that, and up to 7 years in jail. So it's a very significant penalty if this information is shared. And on the census, there is no questions regarding immigration. So we need to hear from everybody. And if you don't, if it is required for everybody to do this, there's not a penalty to my knowledge. Stan, do you know of any penalty if they don't? I don't think there's a penalty, but it is required by our federal government. And we have 13 subcommittees working right now throughout Teller and El Paso County, working on projects to get this information out and communicated with people. I'd like to tell you, and if with each of your different communities, Stan represents El Paso County on the community. We have representatives from every city in Teller County. We have representatives from every city in El Paso County, plus several 13 different subcommittees working with the military, working with the media, healthcare, education, the government groups and nonprofit groups. And we have 3 of them that are unique to us because getting this information out is critical to us. We have a military subcommittee because the young people, the people at Fort Carson and Peterson, they get confused. Where do, let's say someone's living here, but maybe their family's living someplace else. How do they fill this out? So we have made arrangements, and if you would like this, and Jessica told me to ask me to mention this, if each of your communities, whether it's counties or the city, like if you wanted us to come to Woodland Park and present to your city council so they would understand, I would come and do that. We have a PowerPoint to do that. But we would recommend we do that after the first of the year because then it becomes more urgent as we get closer to the date. But all you have to do is ask and we'll be there. But we're doing the military. We have a rising professional group that we're working on. We are talking with Fort Carson right now to present to the heads of all the military installations to try to help them to educate people. It's not so much that people don't want to do it, they just don't understand the importance of it. And so the education is very critical. We've been formed, this Complete Count Committee has been working since September of last year, and we're putting together our plans of implementation. Like I said, the census day is April 1st, but information will be sent out on March 12th. So that's when the first information goes out, and we'll ask everybody to have it filled out by April 1st. After that, the people we don't hear from, like the homeless individuals and everything, will have to be making visits to those camps. We'll have to be making visits to some of the apartment complexes, senior living environments. We've made arrangements that if someone is suffering from dementia, we can help them fill that out. It's important that they do this. And then we'll start going around to the households that haven't responded in May, and we need to have this completed by December of 2020. The 2020 census will inform tax policies, planning, funding for roads, schools, and hospitals, and redrawing of boundaries. The full census will direct more than $13 billion of federal funds into Colorado. The full census participation is highly likely to represent another congressional person, as I mentioned, in Washington, D.C., and it also helps with businesses to make better decisions as to where they want to locate and things of that nature. Everyone counts. We need your help to raise the awareness of this and to share the information and to encourage participation. On the card that I passed out, there's a website. I would encourage you to ask people to go to that website. Right now, there's well over 200 local jobs. They're temporary and part-time, but they pay between $13.50 and $20.50. So if you have people that would like a temporary part-time job to help with the census part, they can find out at that website where that's at. If you look on the back, you can see three important reasons why we do it, and the name of the committee. So we just need your help, and I'd be glad to try to answer any questions if you have any at this time.
Briefly, any questions from around the board members?
Yes. Yeah, Stan.
Sorry, Stan?
Yes, thank you. So one of the things that I learned about a census that I guess I had not noticed before, even the students at our universities get counted in the census here because on 1 April, school will be in session. So even if they are a resident of another state, they get counted here as part of our census because they're in school here. So it is really important that everybody get counted. And you talked about a shortfall of, the harm that 7% would do. 7% represents $1.5 billion in federal money over a decade that would not come to our community if we miss 7%. If we take that 7% down to 2%, let's say we're successful with that, $1 billion of that $1.5 billion comes back to us.
Yeah.
So, I have to imagine a census is never perfect. There's always going to be at least a few. But if we get it from that 7% down to 2%, that's an extra $1 billion in our community. And so, to your point, every vote counts, and we need to go everywhere and get everybody counted in the census. It's really, really important for the community.
Stan, what's important, it's not just dollars come to it, it's dollars that belong here. It's not just dollars that we're trying to take from someplace else. It's dollars that belong here.
Any other questions? Thank you, Merv. It's great to see you back. Great to see you still in public service.
Yeah, you bet.
Very good.
Thank you.
We'll move on to, is there any other public? I think a public from the room would like to address the board of directors. Seeing none, we'll close public comment.
Mr. Chair, if I could, just wanted to make a quick recognition.
Okay, Andy?
Yeah, I just wanted Jody Barker is going to join me, our AAA director. Just wanted to recognize our AAA case managers that just managed our open enrollment process. It just closed. If you want to come on up, Barbara, Gretchen, Roma. One of the key services we provide in the AAA and the Area Agency on Aging is assisting our residents and your constituents throughout the whole region on Medicare open enrollment. It's a pretty intense period that goes from October and just closed last Friday. And we had a really especially intense period this past year for, I think, a variety of reasons. We've been doing a lot of outreach and communication throughout the region to let people know about different options they have. We do Medicare 101 classes throughout the whole year, and it really paid off. We're still crunching the numbers. I don't know exactly how many numbers we served this year over previous years, but it was, come on over here out of the spotlight. But it was intense this year. The last couple of weeks, walking through the AAA lobby, it was wall-to-wall seniors, it seemed, from 9 to 4. And I was kind of wondering at one point, what are we giving away? And one of our volunteers actually said, well, we're giving away really good free advice. And I think he kind of hit it spot on. So I really wanted to thank Barbara Sigmund, Roma Costanza, Gretchen Bricker, Karen Morgan, and Pamela Hogard couldn't be with us this morning, but really want to thank the 5 of them for their extraordinary service and helping our seniors navigate a really tricky Medicare open enrollment process. So thank you. Jody?
Also wanted to take just a second to recognize also Melissa Martz, our program supervisor, Lucy Jacobs, our volunteer coordinator, and Jenny Phillips, our IT manager, who helped. A new component of open enrollment this year was the mymedicare.gov. People had to have that set up before they could visit with a counselor, and between the 3 of them, our counselors, and about 15 to 18 volunteers, we took over the small conference room downstairs here and set up a computer lab for folks where we would assist them getting that set up so that we did not have to turn them away if they did not come prepared with that. So that was crucial so that everyone that came in the door could be seen, whether they had that set up before they walked in the door or as part of the sign-up service. So a big thank you to all of them. It was the first time this had ever happened, the first time it was required, and so we're going to be looking in that, tweaking some of our processes, making it smoother, making it more robust. But just a big thank you to all of those who were involved as well. Thank you, Andy.
Thank you. Our consent agenda has 2 items on it, including minutes of the last meeting and financials up through 31 October, third quarter. Anybody like to pull an item off for discussion?
Move to approve the consent calendar?
Motion to approve. Is there a second?
Second.
There's a second from Sharon Thompson. Discussion? All those in favor say aye.
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 Opposed, nay. That passes. Thank you. Informational items. Item 5A, presenting candidates for the 2020 PPACG Board Officers. Andy, the chair of that committee, Andy Pico.
Good morning, all. You have before you the recommended slate. This was put together by the committee who took a look at this, and we went by the guidelines. I just want to give a couple minutes of explanation on this. We took a look at what it would take, not just for 2020, but we wanted to take a look at what that rotation was going to be as we anticipate people's time and service to the organization, how many years ahead they have, and sort of looking ahead to try to not just pick for 1 year, but try to set it up for the future, recognizing that elections may disrupt that somewhat. So we also took a look at balancing El Paso County, Colorado Springs, and all of the other municipalities to ensure that we had a balance. We had a balance between the counties since there are 3. And so we're kind of taking a look at trying to make that representative across the board. And again, also looking ahead at everybody's anticipated time and service to be expected. One recommendation we would like to have you all think about for next year and the following. We have had in the last several years now kind of a de facto serve in place for 2 years, 2 terms, unless term limits or elections disrupted that. That did not used to be the case. It used to be a 1-year rotation, and our recommendation is in the future to consider going back to that 1-year rotation, simply because that affords the opportunity for people to rotate through the positions a little bit, because what we've noticed is that you'll have people jump in, start running the chairs, so to speak, and run out of time in service with term limits saying no more. So just looking ahead at what that is, that's just a recommendation we leave for the future.
Okay. Questions for Andy or the committee, nominating committee? Just to comment how we'll run these elections, this is the presentation of nominations by the nominating committee. Our bylaw still requires us to take nominations from the floor. So this is not the end. There may be additions to this. We'll take those from the floor at our January board meeting. In the event there's a contested seat, my thought is we'll proceed with those that are uncontested and then take the seats that are contested one by one, and we'll vote. Majority vote would appoint an officer to the Board of Directors Executive Board. Any questions from the board? Gentlemen, thank you for your work on the committee. I look forward to January making some changes. All right, we'll move on into item 5B, Long Range Transportation Plan Draft. Public comments. Catherine.
Good morning, Catherine Winger, Senior Transportation Planner, PPACG. So over the past 8 months, we've been bringing the draft 2045 Long Range Transportation Plan to our committees for review and edits. The LRTP is the federally mandated regional long-range plan that includes all projects that could significantly alter our transportation system or the air quality in the area over the next 20 years. So ultimately, the projects that are selected for federal funding and listed in our short-range plan, or the TIP that we also bring to you, must be listed or consistent with this long-range transportation plan. So a new LRTP is developed every 45 years, and as part of that process, we released a draft document for a 30-day public comment period and held open houses as well. And that ended on November 8th. We did not receive any general public comments. We did have a couple people attend our open houses, and we did receive comments from El Paso County and Fountain and Federal Highway after the fact, because some new information came up for those comments. And so those comments are summarized in your attachment 2. And so the El Paso County comment was with regards to a South 21 Powers South Extension study and potential construction of that extension to I-25. They felt that with current discussions that this should be added to the long-range plan, and it's been developer driven, so it's be considered private funding, and so it wouldn't affect our fiscal constraint of the document as far as that goes. And so staff response is that we feel like this project should have been added and included so that the discussions can continue there and potentially a study could be done for that South Powers extension. Additionally, Fountain agreed with El Paso County regarding that extension, and so they put in a comment for that as well. And then El Paso County also commented on they would like a study that examined a limited access loop east of Powers, so that even further east. That would be a regional study. Currently, in our fiscally constrained project list, we already have a pool for regional studies, so we felt that this actually fit within that and the amount, and so we didn't add an additional project. We just felt that it fit within something that we already included in our fiscal constraint. And then as far as the federal highway comments, in general, they were just federal language updates and making sure that our language matches exactly what they would like us to say in those documents. So we made those updates as well based on our federal highway, our local representatives' suggestions. So additionally, during this process over the last couple years, or just over the last 8 months actually, we have been working with Mountain Metro Transit and a consultant to develop both a transit plan and a specialized transit plan. These plans will be incorporated into the long-range plan as an appendix, and they've also included their own stakeholder and public involvement activities. And so in addition to being listed in the appendix, the plan also includes a fiscally constrained project list or suggested list over the next 20 years, and that will replace the current listing that we have in our Chapter 8, which is our project listing, because that's the newly suggested project list that came out of these plans. And so that list is actually here, if you wouldn't mind taking one and passing. And so they would replace what's currently listed in the plan just for the transit projects, but it still stays within the fiscal constraint or the anticipated amount of revenues over the next 20 years. And Brian Vituli is here if you have any questions regarding this table and the updates there. And then, so this month, we're bringing the final draft with changes based on any public comments we received for your review and edits. And then next month, we'll be requesting final approval of the long-range transportation plan. So please let us know if you have any comments based on these edits. Otherwise, we hope to have final approval next month.
Good question.
Question from the board. Around the table. Stan?
Yes. So a question on this, and this is more about me just understanding the intent and purpose of this document, because there's plenty of road projects that aren't on here.
Yes.
So what's the criteria for how it gets on here or doesn't get on here, or does that mean that these are the projects that are intended to be funded? I mean, widening of an extra lane in I-25 downtown, because there's always traffic on there now based on the economy that we have, and grade separation on Highway 24 on the west side between 25 and Manitou Springs, and grade separation maybe on Powers. I mean, I can think of many things that are not on this list. So how does that all work? What's this document, and how does it distinguished and different from all those other projects we need?
In the long-range plan is what's anticipated to be spent over the next 20 years, and I think, are you looking at this?
Well, I mean, that comment comes from looking at the tip, but it's really it's also a broader question.
Okay.
So.
And the projects are, if they're anticipated to be federally or state-funded projects, so on state highways or things that are eligible for federal funding, or if they're regionally significant. So the ones you mentioned are eligible. And from the sounds of it, those projects are listed, I believe, in the document. But that the project selection happens during with our committees and also with the TAC committees making suggestions, and then CDOT also makes suggestions for project selections within our region.
So those projects are listed in the TIP, and then these documents here represent the changes to the TIP then?
Well, the document we're currently talking about is our long-range plan,
Yeah.
and so that's over the next 20 years. And then projects selected from there go into our short-range plan, the TIP, which are only the 4 years of selection from CDOT and from their region.
Okay.
So,
And just big picture-wise, this is our official plan of record for the next 20 years, our comprehensive transportation plan, if you will, for the region, for the urbanized portion of our region. But it also needs to meet a fiscal constraint, but then there also needs to be a relationship between the long-range plan and the 4-year TIP. So we do this once every 4 years. We update the long-range plan, and that's when we look kind of big picture, aspirationally, what we need over the next 20 years. But it's also got to be tempered by what our revenue forecasts look like as well over that 20-year period.
So where do we capture our requirements that maybe we don't have money for?
there is also a list that we have in the document that's our unfunded list, which provides the projects that we see that are important to the region, but we do not currently have the revenues, anticipated revenues for them.
Okay. Thank you.
Kind of a procedural question, Catherine, are these on current dollars, or is each year adjusted for the year that the dollars are spent?
They are adjusted for inflation, yes.
Okay, so both the cost and the revenues are adjusted for both increases in both revenue increases?
And decreases in spending,
Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
But
Okay. Any other question from on the board? This is an informational item. Thank you. Move on to item 5C, our 2021-24 Transportation Program. This is the funded list, draft 5C.
So as the Pikes Peak Region's MPO, or Metropolitan Planning Organization, we're also responsible for managing our short-range transportation plan, or the TIP, which is our Transportation Improvement Program. That is the short range that comes from the projects of the long-range plan. It implements the region's long-range transportation plan. The TIP is required to list all the federal, state, and regionally significant funded projects in our area over the next 4 years, and we complete a new TIP every 2 years, and then we make occasional updates or amendments as necessary. Our current TIP is the 2019, our fiscal year 2019 through 2022 TIP, and it goes through 2022. And we're currently in the process of developing a new TIP, which will be 21 through 24. And this will contain regional, transit, and CDOT funding priorities for years 21 through 24. Since the first 2 years of this new document were in the last 2 years of the current one, those will roll forward, so 21 and 22 projects will roll forward. And then we did a call for projects and projects request for years 23 and 24 for any projects that needed to be added in those years for our region. So the call for projects for our region was for SB Metro and TAP funds. These are the federal funds that PPACG has that is not required, but that we can select projects for in our region for the federal funds. And so that we held a call for projects in October, and then we did a project prioritization workshop in November to prioritize the regional projects for just those two funds, and then we also requested MMT and CDOT submit projects for our region as well for those years. So the draft document and the associated project list can be found online as well as in attachment 2 of your handout, and then also in the document that's coming around. Those include the CDOT and the transit projects that are proposed for funding in our region. So at the time that this memo had been released, we hadn't received the CDOT project yet, so that's why it's in a handout for you now. So this month we are bringing you the draft TIP as an information item for review and comment, and next month we will request an approval to release the document for a 30-day public comment period. And we'll also hold a open house for that as well. So like with our long-range plan, we have the requirement of public comments and making sure that the public is aware of the proposed funding for the region. So after that public comment period, we'll return to your committees for information item, let you know if we've received any comments, and then hopefully a planned final approval in April.
Catherine, I recognize all the funding sources except one, hotspot pool. Where did that come from? I appreciate it because it's in my region, but
Yeah.
tell me about that.
I believe that's a newer kind of funding that they've kind of separated out, but Wendy's going to have to help me with that one.
Okay.
It's a safety? Okay, it's a safety pool.
Faster safety?
Yeah, I can explain it a little bit.
Okay.
It's been around for a long time.
Huh.
Each region gets about $500,000 every year, and it's kind of just a hot spot is just what's a safety thing that's come up that maybe needs a little extra money. So it's a little more flexible. It's all state funding, and the traffic group usually has access to it. So it's usually used for signals or intersection improvements, and it's kind of things that just weren't anticipated, and you need to have a little extra money.
Hotspot meaning it's a high traffic incident, high fatality location, or just a high focus for
Yes.
all the above?
It's pretty flexible, so
Got it.
it's just,
Okay.
yeah, it becomes a hot spot pretty quickly, so it's not something generally you know is going to come up. So, but, we get about $500,000 every year, so this is just a portion of what the Region 2 gets, but.
Okay. So for those who don't have this before, it's about almost $24 million for the 4-year period in this current proposed TIP. Other questions by the board? Jill or Sharon?
On the page under the faster, can you tell me where State Highway 85 in Maxwell is?
Going to look to CDOT on that one.
I think it's in Fountain somewhere, but I honestly don't know.
recognize. Is that what you're calling the roundabout that's by B Street and Venatucci? I hadn't heard a name
It's
for
going to
it.
be a built roundabout. It's not there yet.
Okay, so is that the one by Venatucci and B Street? I mean, I know that one's coming eventually. I just hadn't heard it called. I didn't know how to name.
No, Venatucci and B Street is
No.
not it, because that's not a
Okay.
state highway.
It's on the other side of I-25, that's near Bennett.
So it's not in Fountain.
It's in the Stratmore Valley area.
Oh, okay, thank you.
Is it on the east side?
Yes.
Okay. I was just
So
trying
I
to place
think
it
it
in
says
my mind.
85 comes up, out of Fountain. Is it in the county area, Jennifer? So again, I know it's in future years, but 2023, and that's where I've seen it too, but I don't know if we've had scoping yet. You know what I mean? We're not in the process of designing it quite yet. So I'll try to get you a map though, too, to show where it is.
Other questions? Yes, Dan? Okay.
So, thank you, Mr. Chair. So, I guess I'm still hung up on the previous topic a little bit. Sorry about that. It does talk about a draft 2045 long-range plan, and, of course, the documentation that's connected to it only talks about funding out to 2024. It doesn't talk about design concepts or strategy concepts about how to have a proper infrastructure in a fast-growing community so that we can remain healthy out to 2045. So since that's a draft and it says we're going to be voting on it in January, I don't know if maybe it's myself, and I myself am remiss in maybe not asking for a copy of it and reviewing it, but it looks like it's out at the committees for review right now. So how are we going to have a process to review that, whatever it says, and then vote on it in January? How are we going to do that?
We've been reviewing this, I think, chapter by chapter over the last, have we done it?
8 months, yeah.
8 months.
Since June, it's been.
In bites.
In bites, yes, to all of our committees.
Now, the bites have been a link, not a document, because how lengthy is the entire document?
About 250 pages.
Yeah.
I think.
Okay, I guess I'm going to gather all those links and review it all in this month.
There you
It's
go.
all,
So,
it should all
okay.
be at one link now, and you can just click on the different chapters on our website. But we can
All
make
right.
sure you can.
Thank you.
Yes. Okay, all right. Okay, anything else, Catherine? Okay.
Just the next.
I understand person in the room would like to make, in public comment, a portion, like to address the Board of Directors.
Hi, my name's Jolene Hausman. I'm Executive Director of Fountain Valley Senior Center. And this comment's in regards to 5B. The Specialized Transit Plan is an appendix to the Long Range Transportation Plan. On behalf of all the specialized providers in the area, we're very excited that this year in the 2045 plan, there was great outreach to the specialized providers, our citizens, and the communities that need the specialized transit. And we really feel that the specialized transit plan going forward this time really focuses on the senior and disabled populations, which is what the federal government defines as specialized transit. So you'll see reflected this year that it no longer includes paratransit because that's in the fixed route system, and it only focuses on specialized transit. So we just wanted to extend our gratitude that the seniors and disabled populations' voices were heard, and there was above and beyond outreach to the specialized populations this year.
Thank you. Appreciate that. Any other public comments? All right, we will now close public comment. Next item, 5D, transportation safety target setting. Catherine.
Me, Catherine Winger. So PPACG is also responsible for another federal regulation, and we're ensuring we complete our federal requirements regarding performance measures. Performance measures are used to track and monitor and maximize the benefits of our transportation planning decisions, meeting our regional goals that we came up with for the long-range plan, and then linking the infrastructure investments to the long-range plan and to the TIP, or the short-range plan. There are a total of 20 performance measures that are required by the federal regulations, and they require us to analyze data and set targets to help meet those regional goals. So in particular, we have to set new safety target goals and targets every year based upon updated data that we receive. So the safety targets for, in particular, are listed in your memo, and they are for number of fatalities, the fatality rate, the serious injury rate, and the number of non-motorized fatalities and serious injuries. The targets you see in the memo are the statewide targets that the state has set for this coming calendar year. And as an MPO, we're also required to set targets as well, but we have two options. We can either support the state targets or create our own regional targets based on our data. So over the last 2 years, PPACG has chosen to support the state targets, and the state targets additional background on how the state has set their targets and the requirements are provided in attachment 1 in that presentation, and I'm happy to take questions on that. And additional data can be found in attachment 2 as well regarding the state trends and the regional trends for safety. So PPACG staff is going to recommend that we support the state targets again this year, and will continue to support those targets through our project selection criteria and processes. This month, however, is only for information, and we'll bring this back next month for a recommended approval.
Catherine, but do we set targets that are for just the MPO as well? So we would take this is hard to see. It's 618 fatalities as a target. That's scary. But do we then set a target for about 9% of that? Or are we simply asking to approve the statewide target as a whole?
We are suggesting to support the state target, so we wouldn't have our own regional portion of that. But we could. That's the second piece. You could either support the state or create your own based on your own region, just the regional data or the network in your area.
And how would that, if we were to parse out just the regional target, would that be based on vehicle miles traveled, lane miles, or how would a subdivision of the total state total be? How would we assign a total to ourselves? Any thought to that?
It's typically you often use the same kind of data analysis process that the state uses, but then just use your data, which includes typically a trend line analysis, and then you take into consideration vehicle miles traveled and then population estimate as well. So it would be going to the state and asking them for how they came up with their targets and then basing ours off of that.
Yeah, Jill?
So, Catherine, I'm trying to understand these graphs I'm looking at, and I see CDOT's target setting. So just using the first one, You okay, Mom?
I'm fine.
I know, I'm just worried about getting sick.
I'm glad I have a baby.
It says, no. So they show 618 fatalities as their target goal setting.
Yes.
But then when you look at our trends, of course, our numbers are different because it's just one region in the state. So, I mean, where do we show, I guess that's not even really my question. I guess I just really want to know that whatever goal we have is a stretch goal, that we are actually working to reduce the number, and that by going with the state numbers, that it's just not easy for us.
Fair enough.
And I can't tell from this if we're actually doing something or we're just going along and if we're doing something to actually reduce the number of fatalities and reduce the number of crashes.
Yes. And so the state's targets are based on the trend attachment 2 in your packet has the exact number, so you can kind of better see what those are. So the reduction that they have chosen, it's not, I probably consider aspirational as far as these are concerned, specifically because I imagine with performance measures that are federally required, if they don't meet those targets, then there's certain aspects of our federal funding that is less flexible. So if they don't meet the targets, then certain money needs to go towards meeting safety targets, which happens a lot across the country, actually. So as far as aspirational, it's not really, but I know that CDOT's working towards an aspirational goal of Vision Zero, I believe it's called, John.
That's what it's called.
So while they have these specific targets for the federal measures to make sure we meet these requirements and work within these constraints, there's also a broader goal of Vision Zero and working towards that. So I know there's CDOT people here too that can also probably talk better to how they're selecting projects as far as that's concerned, but that's the measures.
I appreciate hearing that, and I didn't know that CDOT as a whole was working toward Vision Zero, which I very much respect, and I guess I just wonder if PPACG could be trying along those same lines to have zero fatalities, and I think it's a really great program, and I've never heard the word Vision Zero here at PPACG, and go ahead.
Sure. Mr. Chair, if I could, one thing we're going to do, we're kind of zooming into traffic safety as well, but building up staff capacity and all that over the past year, it hasn't been front and center, but Jason O'Brien now has kind of taken the lead, one of our transportation planners, and he's been working with the public safety folks and traffic engineers and other folks that do a lot of awareness around driver safety in the community, including Miley Gray and others. And we're going to schedule a presentation first quarter of 2020, I think we're aiming for February, to talk about what's going on out there and what we as a regional body can do between awareness and better design, better project selection, all of that. It's complicated. So we haven't really gone down the path of Vision Zero yet, but just engaging with other groups that are working around this. We want to bring some ideas to this group and get some feedback as far as where we go from here.
Well, I very much appreciate it. I know in the city of Colorado Springs, we are experiencing huge numbers of not just traffic fatalities, but pedestrians and bikes. And anything we can do as a region to reduce that number, and a lot of that is through design, and how we design our roads and streets to be safer for all and to reduce speed. So I am very excited about this. Thank you.
Yeah, Stan?
Yes, and Councilman Pico, I think, had his hand up before me, but I'm willing to go. Okay, I'm willing to talk. Okay, sorry. So for the CDOT crash trends, and then kind of also then looking at PPACG crash trends. So it does seem to me, I think, Jill, you might have a valid point. If you take a look at the 2020 target, I believe that's the target setting. So I'm just looking at serious fatalities. 3,271 apparently is the target. But when you look at the chart, 2017 was under 3,000, and 18 was probably in that 3,200 kind of range. So it almost kind of feels like we're picking the previous year's number and hoping to stay at that or below it. And then the other point I'm interested in making is just I don't recall seeing these statistics before. Maybe I've seen them and I don't remember them. But as far as PPACG crash trends, again using serious injuries as the number, We've gone from 500 in 2010 down to under 200 this last year, which is a fantastic record.
I will.
So I'm just kind of curious. It seems like I'm not sure we're setting goals with those numbers with CDOT. It looks like we're just trying to maintain what we have there. And then it seems like we're doing a really good job locally. So those are my comments.
I have
Catherine, then I'm going to respond,
Sorry.
and then Andy, please.
It's an important piece of that, why it looks like we have done so well. It actually is a data error. So we actually.
That was actually my question coming up.
Yeah, it is actually a pretty big data error that CDOT and we are aware of, starting in 2016, where it shows is that the police or the police departments report their data to the Department of Revenue via a software system, and that system is not accurately transferring it, and so. And then that's where CDOT gets their data, and that's where we get our data. So there's an issue. There's definitely an issue. Yeah.
Well, that was,
I've been waving my hand for like 20 minutes. So
ladies first.
That was my question, and my concern was, based on just data of driving around town, I just really can't believe that the number of, the way it's defined as actual serious crashes is going down that much. I mean, almost 50% in 1 year. And then the trend, I mean, I'm having to allow 30 extra minutes to get anywhere on I-25, even just to make it up to Colorado Springs, and then just sit and read, which is okay. But when you have to plan an extra 30 minutes into your day to get anywhere, you really have trouble saying that the data is trending down that far and that much. So my question was, you may have answered it with that, was had somebody redefined actual serious crashes in about 2016, because you can't, to go from 524 and then almost cut it in half 5 years later just doesn't seem realistic based on just data of us all driving around town. So how can, if you know the data is flawed, how can we be setting our goals off flawed data? So, Andy, I may have taken your whole...
You took a piece out of it.
Okay.
Yeah, I was, a couple points. I mean, you've got the note down there, the data is incorrect due to the data reporting issues, and you've explained kind of that. It's where good intentions collides with the data, if I can borrow that. No? Okay. But it's such an error that you've basically outlined that I'm questioning whether we should even show that data if it's that much off, because it sounds like it's half of probably what's actually occurring if I kind of draw those trends. The other point I was going to make is that a couple years ago we dove into great depth on exactly how to do these kind of goals. And as we throw up the CDOT goals, those are not goals to achieve. Those are our intentions to lower the rates to, success, and those are stretch goals based upon the past. And we've had quite a lot of discussion about this up at the stack as well, taking a look as to how that's structured. So these really are aspirational goals to reduce the rate as opposed to being targets we'd like to achieve. It's kind of a somber way to take a look at it, because we're talking about how many people are going to get killed on the roads. But there's such a data error in there that I'm not sure that we should even put those numbers up, because I'm not sure what it's telling us, if it's telling us anything.
Except it says we're supposed to.
Yeah, but
we're supposed to approve it by February.
We're supposed to improve it, yeah. And it makes it kind of hard to figure out how are you going to approve goals where you don't have accurate data. But so the question, though, leading to that is the actual fatality rate doesn't look like it has that error. It looks much more consistent. So that sounds like goals that we could accurately set and measure. The other ones, I don't know how we can measure it, but then that leads to one more question. If we've identified the problem, are there measures being undertaken to fix that data error? And that's kind of an open question both for CDOT as well as our local jurisdictions to see if we can figure out what's wrong and fix that. Because how do you measure success if you can't measure anything?
No, it's a bad number, we don't know why it's bad. Do we know this, is that true?
For the data collection?
Correct.
I know that CDOT is working with the Department of Revenue and
Yeah.
with the police departments to try and fix the error and try to figure out how they can make sure that the transfer is happening accurately. I imagine it's not a cheap fix as far as it's the particular software that's not working, whereas other police departments use different software.
It comes
and
right
is-
down to the law enforcement person's form in his hand, a carbon copy form on scene, maybe filled out in the rain, and then all the different jurisdictions may be using a different form. We've had this discussion at STAC. It's a complicated data collection method, and then collating it all into something that's clean and apples to apples is tough, so.
Yeah, but going back to a point I made a moment ago, it looks like the actual fatalities rate the data is consistent and actually trending up, which in an increasing population kind of matches what I think most of us have seen. So that data looks correct. It's the serious injuries that seems to be the problem.
Yes.
Both non-motorized and actual serious injuries are both tracking the same way. So in fact, there's so much in line, it looks like the error is in non-motorized fatality and serious injuries, and that's driving the rest of the data? That's just a question, and probably can't answer that here, but that's up for CDOT. And
Yeah, there's, while it's not an insignificant amount, it is a fewer number of fatalities for the non-motorized, so the serious injury is the one that's probably driving that downward trend that you see in 15 to 16.
Well, it shows actual serious injuries, but it tracks the number tracks
Yeah.
with the non-motorized fatality and serious injuries, and I don't know if that's two categories together or if that's one category, but it looks like what's going on. So
Yeah.
I don't know. I mean, that's having looked at data before. There's a very clear correlation there, but I leave that open. And I've talked enough.
Mr. Elsner.
Yeah, I would just like to say that, fatalities are easy to track because you have that. Serious injuries, when you look at it, they're very difficult to track. Okay, someone was transported. Was that a serious injury? Well, they broke their arm. Is that a serious injury? You get into what is a serious injury, how do you track it, and then CDOT does a very good job when there is a fatality of investigating it, and they have the information. But when someone's transported, is there, what type of follow-up is there to find out whether that injury actually was serious or not? So when you get into the serious injury part, I don't think any of the data is going to be accurate because I don't think you'll be able to truly track whether it was serious or not and in whose mind was it serious. We had a young lady in Fairplay who thought she was being terribly inconvenienced because during our whiteout, we asked her to give up her cot so an 81-year-old man could lie down. And it was it was life and death for her. So what is serious? It's too subjective to be able to really, I think, pin anything on it.
We'll see. Andy, go ahead, and we'll wrap up this one. Go ahead.
Yeah, that kind of reminds me here, when I was transported, I don't think that there was any indication in any of the police reporting about how serious the injury was. So I got transported with concussion. I don't think there was any follow-up. I don't think the police would have tracked that in any manner other than the fact that I was transported. So, don't know. I don't know how that would have ended up in the data. But it kind of tracks with what you're talking about here. There's a vast hole in the data. There's probably just as much in how much the police are tracking the follow-on. I think what you just said kind of hit the point.
Okay. So, reminder, we'll see this one back for action in our January agenda item. Any guidance to staff? Andy, any questions? Questions from the board for how to proceed for January?
We'll sort through the direction we got today, and
Okay.
it goes back to the TAC and then to the board for
Yeah.
final approval, January, February? Yeah.
February. Yeah.
Just make it aspirational.
Okay, we'll roll up our sleeves and get into it. Okay.
Thank you.
Okay. Any questions?
Yeah, with regard to, direction to staff, So it says, there's this statement in here that says we have to approve it by February. There's a few other words in there. So I guess my first question, and this is something you can do the research on, is that a statutory requirement? You know, are we compelled to approve it or accept CDOT's? Because, you know, my sense of it is not to approve data that we know is bad data. Or approve a goal against data that we know the data is bad. So maybe, you know, like if it's not a statutory requirement and we have a little bit of discretion, maybe we approve goals for fatalities because we know those numbers can be accurate, and we maybe request that something be done about how to better report, you know, severe accidents or something like that. But it kind of depends on whether that's a statutory requirement or if we have some discretion. So I just don't know where we are on that. Thanks.
It is a statutory requirement that we approve our targets for the region 180 days after CDOT does. So that's where the February timeframe comes from. But, yeah.
Okay, well, we'll move on then to item 6E, ECHO Strategic Plan Quarterly Report. We've been working under a strategic plan now for, I think, this is our second year.
Yeah.
First time ever on PPACG, so I appreciate a quarterly action, where we are on the plan. Appreciate that.
Sure. Yeah, and just real briefly, you've got a pretty lengthy report in the packet that identifies a bunch of activities under the different themes that were adopted around information sharing, advocacy objectives, aging and transportation, and then other programs as well. And I'll mention just a couple of highlights from the past quarter, just so you're aware. We talked a lot about the long-range transportation plan already. I mean, it's a huge effort to get that together through our committees and do the public outreach process, and we'll have that on the agenda for January for adoption. But that was one of the key things we accomplished in the transportation area. Also, I think I've mentioned this before, we've been coordinating with Dr. Cog up in the Denver region on a tip database, so we can have a better management tool to manage our tip process down here. So we're making good progress with that. And Catherine talked about the call for projects we've had for the recent tips. We've made some pretty good progress there this past quarter. And a lot of movement as well around information sharing and data development with our regional partners. That's one area that we're really going to be focusing on moving forward. Just a couple of things in the AAA area that I'll mention. We talked about the open enrollment. Very active period that we had over the past 2 months. I think we mentioned this last month that we got a grant from the Next 50 Foundation for housing home sharing for seniors in the region. It was on behalf of the Sunshine Home Shares group, so really pleased that we're going to be able to stand that up, and it's kind of a portion of our affordable housing solution, especially for seniors in the community if they're interested in sharing their homes with non-seniors and others, so pretty excited about that. And one other thing I'll mention that's in the AAA portion is one of our ombudsmen, Scott Bartlett, was appointed to the State Veterans Living Community Commission. There's been a lot of interest in creating a Veterans Living Center here in the Springs region, so now that we've got somebody on the commission, hopefully that'll help as well, but Scott, our lead ombudsman, will help us in that regard. And then two other things I'll mention real quick. We've wrapped up the water quality management plan for the region, the 208 water quality plan this past quarter. And finally, we're going to talk about this here in a few minutes, but really, I think, making good progress on preparing for the 2020 legislative session with our updated legislative themes and identifying what might be coming down the pike from that standpoint as far as state legislative issues. So that's just a quick overview, but you've got about 5 or 6 pages of detail of other stuff we've been up to over the past quarter as it relates to the strategic plan.
Good. Questions or discussion? All right, thank you. We'll move on to our action items then. Item 6A, fiscal year 2019-2022 TIP, Transportation Improvement Program Amendment 10. Catherine.
Last one, I promise. Catherine Wenger, Transportation Planner, PPACG. So as I mentioned earlier, we have our Short-Range Transportation Improvement Program, or our TIP. Our current one that we have that is active is our 2019 through 2022. So occasionally we have to make updates or amendments to this document so that it's up to date and it coincides with what the state has and what we have across the state. So we have received one request from CDOT to make an update to this document, and then PPACG is also making a request to update the document as well. The first one is to add a project from CDOT In tip year 2020, it's a US 24 West Bridge at mile point 295.45 on westbound US 24. The funding source is a federal bridge on state highways funding system, and the total estimated cost is $2.3 million. The second request is to reduce funds from PPACG STP Metro funds. The original cost was $1 million, and since then we have worked with CDOT to better refine how much funds that we would need to contribute based on our portion of the state, since it'll be a statewide travel survey. And that amount has been reduced to $700,000. So the $300,000 will come back to the PPACG planning pot, so to speak, SP Metro Fund, and we reallocated to another project or two projects, or however many it is, when that gets reprogrammed in the next couple of months.
Very good. Okay. Questions for Catherine? Ken?
Can you just point out where mile marker 295.45 is? Where is that bridge?
And thank you, Mayor. That was my question, too. Excellent.
My understanding, it's between Manitou Springs and just before Chipeta, or not Chipeta Park. Is it Chipeta Park? Is that right, Wendy? Thank you, Wendy. And between Chipeta Park, where there's a separation, so it's a bridge.
It's somewhere in the canyon.
Yeah, but not from Karen.
And this is a replacement, so we're going to remove a bridge and drop in a new one. Simply put.
Replace it with a box culvert.
Oh.
We're going to remove a bridge and put in a box culvert.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Okay, we have a proposed motion. That is to approve the Amendment 10 of the FY 2019-22 TIP. Is there a motion?
So moved.
So there's a motion, there's a second. Second, from Don Wilson. Discussion. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. That passes. Thank you.
Thank you.
Item 6B, Legislative Committee Update. We are getting ready to go to work, right, Jessica?
Good morning, board members. Jessica McMullen, your Policy and Communications. So you will have all gotten an updated and amended agenda item for this. The legislative themes and priorities, as you initially received it, did not change. Those suggested by the legislative committee were presented to you last month for a chance to look at, and then we brought them back to you this month for a vote. But the amended item, after the committee met again on December 4th, they really discussed a road usage charge concept and conferred with our lobbyist, Lauren Furman, talked about paths. So the committee wanted to bring that to you. So I'm going to pass that over to Norm.
Okay. This is something in that I was part of a RUC study pilot project, the state of Colorado, 2 years ago. And nothing was ever acted upon at the state level on a road usage charge. It appeared to me that there need to be a structural change for how, particularly in view of electric vehicles that pay no road usage charge, no mileage tax because they pay no fuel. Right now, you may know, the only fund, there's no general fund committed to roads maintenance at all, zero. The Highway Trust Fund, federal, and the State Highway User Trust Fund combined total of about 40 cents per gallon is the primary source of revenue in the state of Colorado. As the number of electric vehicles increase, we expect it to be about 300,000 vehicles by the year 2030. And the Highway Trust Fund at the federal level will be bankrupt once again in July of next year. That fund is non-viable, and the consensus is that gas tax in general is a non-viable source of funding of roads. This bill, we're proposing as a study bill. There are many unanswered questions, some of them which are quite intrusive into public privacy. In the pilot, the public privacy question, personal privacy question, was the predominant question. First of all, how do we measure where, how many miles are traveled? How do we measure that? How do we collect that data? And then secondly, and even more intrusive perhaps, is how do we collect payment? The average vehicle miles traveled for a vehicle in the state of Colorado is about 13,700 miles, 13.7. At 40 cents per mile, that runs out to about $160 per vehicle. So we're looking to replace a neutral rather, that $160 total per vehicle. If there were a 1.2 cents per mile bill assessed on every single mile driven for vehicles up to 10,000 gross vehicle weight, we would be able to capture, fill that gap, not only in the short term now because it's the relatively small number of electric vehicles, but over time, that gap deepens, widens, and we now have a mechanism in place. So what we've done is I have drafted language. I've personally drafted this language, and I'm provided it to two legislators, one who said, I'll take a good look at it. Another legislator said, yeah, probably not in my wheelhouse. I have now, as of last week, when we had met with the governor at a transportation funding roundtable, I did provide it to the state legislative, Mr. Andy Karjian, some of you may know. Lauren Furman, our own lobbyist, has begun work on this as well. The question that we'd like to address to the full board here is this an issue we would like, as a Council of Governments, like to move forward as a legislative priority? Is this something we can get behind? One of the things that surprised me at this statewide roundtable with the governor last week was we broke into small groups, and each table independently came up with the idea that some method had to be found to replace the gasoline tax. The road usage charge has come up over and over again. The state of Washington, the state of Oregon are two cases where that mechanism is in place. And this simply looks at whether or not this is a viable source of revenue, what are the security issues, how do we mitigate those issues, who owns the data of where you're driving, who has access to that data, how do you get it? Is it if it be by court order versus open public published? Well, I don't think so. There's a whole range of issues that would be rolled into this study bill that would set the stage perhaps for future legislation. So that's the road usage charge bill we've been talking about in legislative. Dick or Andy or Ken or others have comment.
Yeah, I'd like to add to that. With the dwindling amount of tax coming from fuel, we really need to come up with something, and I think this having a study to look at all of the alternatives and try to figure out which direction would make sense, because you do have security issues and everything else. I really think supporting it as a study would be something that PPACG would be interested in doing. I know, being a small county, we rely very heavily on gasoline tax to maintain our roads, and it's going to get to the point where there just isn't enough money to continue unless we come up with another source of revenue, and I think this is a good way to go.
Thank you. Ken, you had a comment? I think.
So, question, my understanding is that this study would just encompass electric vehicles, would not study other alternatives? Is that correct?
As proposed in our language, it is electric vehicles or vehicles have electric motive only. So a hybrid would also be included in the study, but would not propose to collect a vehicle mile or a road usage charge on a gasoline or diesel vehicle.
Right. So I guess from my perspective, I think I would like to see a study, but I'd like to see a more comprehensive study. What are the other alternatives? To me, a road usage charge seems similar to a toll. You go on the road, you pay for the road.
Right.
And so to study that would be great, but not limit it to just electric vehicles. And I know that other vehicles pay their gas taxes, but as people have suggested, that's really not a viable alternative. So why not look at a viable alternative, meaning those who use the road pay for the road, not just those who use electric vehicles pay for that road. So that would be my concern. And I would like to see the study, but I'd like to see it broader.
Okay.
Who are you?
Down the table.
This is Gary from
Gary,
Palmer Lake.
my apologies.
No
Thank you.
problem.
Thank you, Gary.
I would agree with Ken as I looked at this initially, and I missed the last meeting, but as I looked at this initially, I would include hybrids and other things because I think it encapsulates all those things. The other things, as you look at the gas tax, you have to consider over time the federal requirements to keep improving the mileage, and I know that's been argued about with the current administration and that type of thing, but the trend is still to keep improving the mileage and when you're getting a tax on the fuel and you're using less fuel, it works against us. So road usage, I think, is indeed, or some version of it needs to be looked at. I also recognize there's a cost with that. I think back to when we had the required emissions tests, and we all had to go somewhere and get the car tested, and if there were something to, whether there's some technological device, and I'm not a technical person, but some device that got plugged in somewhere so you know exactly how many miles a vehicle traveled in a year, you'd have to do something like that, but that's not going to be free either. Yeah. But I, like Ken, would like to see this thing broadened to include many issues because the gas tax isn't just going to cut it anymore.
Right. And then Andy, and then Stan.
I'm going to disagree slightly with what has been said. The original road usage charge was looking at a replacement, and we really want to stress that, which I think a lot of people have kind of missed. And that would have been a revenue-neutral replacement across the board. What I think what you have proposed, and what most of us in the legislative committee have think that is an appropriate thing to do, is take a look at electric vehicles because they're not paying the equivalent of what the gasoline vehicles are already paying. And in there, I think there's merit to take a look at that study. Broadening it to the entire fleet, I think, is going to be a step too far, which would die in the legislature. Taking a look at bringing electric vehicles up to be on parity with what the current gasoline vehicles are paying, I think is something which we should take a look at. Again, it's a study. It may not be able to be implemented because of all the different issues of private security and everything else that may come up. We don't know, but we don't know until we do the study. But I wouldn't want to broaden it at this point. I want to bring them up to all vehicles paying a fair share as opposed to trying to take the entire elephant in one bite.
So I'll violate my point here, but the point here was really tax equity question, is tax fairness, that everybody pays their fair share of the road. If an electric vehicle pays no taxes, that this simply fills that gap. Stan?
Yes, thank you. And actually I appreciate the dialogue because, it's kind of an interesting question. Every state is grappling with this issue. So we really have to figure out how to get to a solution. Some points or some observations that I have. When you pay taxes for gasoline, it's in essence a road usage tax. You don't use roads if you don't use the gas. So it is in its own way a road usage tax already. And the other thing that's interesting about it is that particular tax, there may be several of us that grumble about that tax, but it has turned into, over the years, an acceptable form of taxation, and its level of taxation has also been accepted by the citizens of the state of Colorado. So I think the scope of this study, which is really about taxation fairness, so that everybody pays their fair share for the use of the tax, and being focused on the vehicles that are not paying the gas tax, I think is appropriate. I'll make the point, though, that whoever ends up getting assigned to do the study, I have no doubt that they're going to at least, if not in a cursory way, at least in somewhat of an in-depth way, probably will address the broader question anyway. Because it's always on everybody's mind. Do we figure out how to tax electric vehicles so it's up to equity with the gasoline tax, or do we go to a completely different taxation system? So I'm sure it won't be ignored when they do the study.
Just a little additional thinking here. So the tax equity was one point. A second point is who will adopt use the tool. Generally, electric vehicle owners are early adopters. They're tech savvy, they're tech competent, they understand. I mean, I've been in it. My kids own a Tesla. I've been in that. Thing is, it has nothing but a steering wheel, and that's all. no transmission. It has an accelerator, but you don't even use the brake because you adjust every time you take your foot off the gas, the vehicle brakes. It's an amazing thing. So the people who own Teslas and EVs are likely going to adopt this early. The other thing is it's going to scale naturally. As the number of EVs in the road scales, the administration of the program servicing those particular devices will grow naturally, organically, rather than trying to implement something, force it down. So a little bit of strategy, but a point well taken. Don, you have a point?
I just wanted to agree with what was said as far as if we want to get this through through the legislative process, I think we do need to take it in steps and focus on the area that's missing, get the conversation started about it, and then broaden it after we have some direction to go with it.
Jessica, what is the guidance that our legislative lobbyist is seeking from the board today?
So the lobbyist wants to make sure that we have a vote of the board that PPACG would like to run this proposed road usage charge study. If we do not have that, it would be a situation where the legislative committee would want to pursue this and end up talking to legislators, which ends up with the board of directors taking a position on the bill in opposition. So we'd really like the board to either support the idea of this study and the legislative committee working with our lobbyist as an active advocate for this bill. It would likely, and I'm quite sure from conversations with Lauren, be written by what Norm has already put together. So, Sharon asked first.
Also, one other point here, if we as a board decide that we want to go down this path, we are telling our lobbyist to spend a lot of her time on this task, which it will, of course, subtract to a certain degree how much we gave her, a limited amount of money and time. So, we're making this a priority if we vote this way.
Okay.
Go ahead,
Sharon.
Thank you. Two things to say. Number one, we do have a little bit more money in the fund that we set aside for the federal legislative, and we haven't spent it in the last 2 years. So if we decided to, we can always adjust money for Lauren if we needed to. I don't know. Andy's having a fit over there, but I know. We did set aside some money if we went into that. It's not a lot. But anyways, if Lauren needed more time, that is an option we can consider and look at. I'm not saying we have to do it. I'm saying it's out there. Secondly, we need to make sure that we realize that if we do this, the bill that gets passed may not be the bill we write. And you have to be willing to accept that. So is it worth the risk and the time to stick our necks out and do this, or wait and see what drops and see if we can possibly get an amendment added to somebody else's bill to add this study onto something else someone is already doing? So because we've seen a lot of bills that we have at the beginning of the session have said we support this bill as written, and by the time May rolls around, we're taking a monitor or no longer supporting that bill. So that is something that can happen. It will be out of our hands once it hits on the legislative floor. So, and I'm not saying we shouldn't do it or shouldn't support it. I'm just saying we need to point out that reality.
Yeah, this is a bold step. Yeah, go ahead, Gary. Gary,
didn't mean to.
To your right. Go ahead. Back to you.
I do want to clarify my comments. The comments I made is because I believe this needs to be out to the public in terms of the broader aspects of things. I would agree with Don in terms of what you deal with. You got to take a small bite of the elephant a step at a time, right. And consequently, I would definitely support this. I was just trying to clarify that it's a much broader problem in general.
Yeah, and that's really a good point, Gary. Is that this is the first time this discussion on a road usage charge would move into a public discussion with public input in an open legislature. This would be the first time.
But will that discussion be a broader discussion? hopefully, or is it strictly limited to the proposal, let's just study electric vehicles? And let me just make a comment about equity. The last time I bought a hybrid vehicle, I don't know the percentage of how much more expensive it was than a non-hybrid or electric vehicle, but it was more expensive. I paid for that. Now, if I had purchased a purely electric vehicle, I'd have to pay for a charging station at home, perhaps, depending on its makeup and so forth, but there are added costs.
Right.
There's also the added benefit in the sense that our state has gone on record as saying we want electric vehicles, we want to reduce emissions, we want to encourage people to do that. That's a state policy.
Yep.
And if this study is only studying the impact of electric vehicles, I believe it will negatively, if it goes into effect, if something happens, it'll negatively impact that policy potentially. And so again, the study is fine, but let's just do it a broader study to see how we can raise fees on an equitable basis for everybody to pay for transportation, not just electric vehicles.
Okay. Don, and then John.
Just a procedural question. If we, like Sharon was saying, if somebody does bring something similar up and we go forward with this, can we pull it at any time and just cut our losses?
Yeah.
I sadly have to say no. Once it is in the hands of our legislators, it is in the hands of the folks who have the bill on the floor. We can ask them to, we can tell them why they should, we can strongly push them to please pull it, but once it is on the floor, it is no longer in our hands.
But once it's on the floor, we've already spent our money. We're not any more invested into it.
Once it's on the floor, we then have the choice of whether we continue supporting it. So if the structure of the bill being written substantially changes the reason we supported it and the reason behind the bill, we can tell Lauren, okay, hands off, we're done.
Yeah.
Which may damage our credibility with our legislators. And that is a thing we do need to be aware of. But we do not have to continue giving her guidance to follow if the bill is substantially changed in a negative fashion.
Okay. Keep in mind, this is the reason why we have advocacy in our strategic plan. When we speak as a council of governments, my hope is that each of us are going back to our member governments. We use our own bully pulpit during our own regular public meetings and may want to speak in this. The question of whether a legislature want to proceed without the public support of the people who voted them in the office, I mean, they could put their own seat in jeopardy. So our support of this bill would I would guess would be huge, and political cover for stepping into dangerous but in our mind meaningful areas would be hopefully in the mind of the legislature when they move. John, let's go to okay. Good discussion here. Cammie, Andy, and then John, please.
Thank you. I'm curious as to whether we're the only group talking about this. Like, would it be us just going it alone with our lobbyist, or is there an undercurrent of other organizations, other people, other entities talking about this?
There is. As I mentioned last week in the round 2 of the governor's transportation funding strategy group, probably 6 of 8 out of the other breakout tables mentioned the Metro Mayor's Council, the who are some of the groups, Andy, where this is already kind of a undercurrent?
So we wouldn't necessarily, why would we recreate the wheel if somebody else is already kind of drafting the legislation and...
No one else has the legislation drafted. It's a discussion only. No one's taking the step. This proposes that we be the lead, we take the step.
I would propose that we do that, but that we pull in those other entities and not fly it alone. Pull them in at the beginning.
Knowing Lauren Furman, she's on it. Okay. Believe me. Yeah. Andy?
Well, I hadn't heard the updates about what had been going on, but the study was done a year ago. Nobody picked it up in the legislature. If we don't put it forward, I don't think anybody will, because I think what Norma's already found out, only 2 legislators have so far have indicated lukewarm, if any kind of support. If we don't push it, I don't know that anybody will. It may come out of the mayor's council. It may not. I think if we take a small step, then, I really favor the limited first step look at this, because that will open up a whole can of worms that will come up, and it may morph drastically. It is a risky step, because when it gets in the legislature, as has been said many times, it may not resemble anything that we initially started with. And we may be running for the hills. But I think it's a step. I think it's a step we ought to take. I mean, it is bringing all the vehicles up. Point's been made that the registration fees for alternative fueled vehicles, whether they're electric or hybrid, are higher, but they're nowhere near the equivalent of what a gasoline vehicle is for the amount of miles that's driven for the average. Looking at the average, so that's what we need to study. If you don't study it, then you don't know.
Right. The alternative to nothing. Of course, when we are drying up, we are scrambling for dollars to keep our roads functioning. And then the alternative sources of funding, there's been discussion about statewide sales tax. Once again, very regressive tax. I mean, we got single moms with 3 children at home paying for roads when they buy diapers. I mean, that doesn't make any sense to me. So, we're going to let John go first. You've been kind of waiting, and then Dick Elsner.
I'm uncomfortable going before the board members, Mr. Chair, please. He'll probably say what I was going to say even more articulate.
All right, Dick?
No, I think most of the points were covered. I think, CCI this isn't one of their legislative priorities, but my guess is that if this shows up as a bill that someone is pushing, that you would have the vote from CCI, which also carries a lot of weight, because I have yet to find a commissioner that's not worried about how they're going to raise money for their roads.
Right. And I have shared this with Eric Bergman, the CCI transportation lobbyist, and I currently chair the Transportation Committee at CCI, Colorado Counties, Inc. So, John?
Mr. Chair, members of the board, I think the only thing I'd like to see if I can help, because apparently I'm some sort of expert on all of this stuff, see if I can help with some of your concerns, is it really is looking at the broader question of the road usage charge, because not only whatever you learn from electric vehicles or hybrid vehicles could also be then applied to regular combustion gas engine vehicles. After you figure out the formula, if we figure out the silver bullet, you could then turn the gas tax from 22 cents a gallon down to 0, and then you are then collecting that through a road usage charge. So anything you learn will be applied to all of the other forms of transportation. I think the reason why it is more palatable for people to step forward and say, if we're going to do a study, if we're going to look at this, let's target hybrid or electric vehicles as the case study to use. And one of the reasons, I think Commissioner Vanderwerf said it very well, is we already have an existing taxation method for the combustion engine. So if I'm driving a combustion engine and I'm already paying the 22.5 cents in federal and the 22 cents in state gas, I'm already using that existing system, so you're going to have to refund me whatever it is and everything else. The issue, or the thing that it's trying to solve, the road usage charge, it really is targeting those things, because that is the technology that is putting that existing gas tax out of business. Because as we have people having more electric vehicles, we have less gas vehicles, and we have built our funding mechanism all around the gas tax, and that's not sustainable over time. So could we certainly include the tax and say, the study, and say anybody who has a combustion engine, if they'd like to participate in the study, they certainly can. It just becomes more problematic given that they're already paying that sort of tax. So that being said, it is broad. Anything that is learned from the study could be applied to the future. So hopefully that it comes across as being helpful and not trying to be argumentative or make a case for anything in particular. I just thought maybe that might help.
I'm curious, if I might, Mr. Chairman. Why is the study just not looking at tolls? I know it's a difficult word to bring up, but road usage charge is a toll,
right,
basically. Why aren't we studying the feasibility, whether the electorate would support that. Let's study the likelihood of doing what most other states are doing, and that is if you use the road, you pay a little bit of money.
Well, managed lanes is already
It is.
It's in the vernacular.
But this group has said, we don't want that, at least in the Gap, for instance.
Well, no, we're talking about possibly laying a road usage charge on top of a toll. I don't think, whether that's your stomach for that, was that you pay a road usage charge on top of paying the toll that that's another point. Andy?
Well, yeah, the gas tax is a toll, but it's how are you going to collect a toll if you do away with the gas tax or want to do that? You got to put a tolling station on every road. So that's not feasible. So this is a feasible way to do it.
Yeah. Stan,
I could make the point. See, this is the interesting part of this dynamic. We are talking about several possible solution points on how to address it. That's actually what the study needs to do. That's actually why we need the study. Because this is really, when you get down to actually really understanding this is really complicated. And there's huge amounts of politics involved in these questions. And so I had made the point previously, because gas tax is already accepted by our citizens, and no one's you might, again, have people grumbling about paying that tax, but everybody does it, right? And it's something that has been vetted and passed through legislation in the past, and we got there. So when we start to mess with that and start looking at alternatives, we kind of bring all of those difficult questions back again, and I think that's a real issue. So I think it's much wiser to propose something that takes a smaller step, gets us into a conversation and a study about how do vehicles that don't pay gas tax pay their fair share for the usage of those roads, and then let the study come back to us and tell us what that means. And I will make the point that John made. I think it's a good point. If we can navigate through this difficult, that will be a political process to figure out how to get there, because there's the potential of privacy issues involved in it. But if we can actually get there and establish the governance for it, it actually becomes a down-the-road pathway for a complete change later. It gets us to a place where some component or some components of this become accepted, and then maybe something more can happen on down the road and we go to something different. But I think to try to bite that all off right at the front, I think it'll cause a problem, and we won't get there. We won't get to the study because it'll be too controversial. So my point of view is I support what is being proposed here. And the last point I'd like to make, there's another interesting component to us having this conversation on this topic, because we're actually stepping out as a PPACG. We're stepping out into something new here about actually being a little bit more aggressive about what we as a board, a group of municipalities might want to actually try to drive a few things. And this is something that Dr. Cog has done frequently, and we've done very little of here. But this community is growing, and we're growing in sophistication, and we're growing in our political power here. And this is, I think, kind of a beginning first stage of starting to flex that in this arena. And I think it's, considering there could be plenty of other very controversial things that we could talk about, this one I think is a lot easier for us to get started with. So I kind of make that point as well.
Yes, Neil?
Yeah, I just want to tag on to what Stan said. And first and foremost, thank Norm for bringing this forward. It's hard for me to understand why legislatures throughout the state have not jumped on this. I mean, it's clear to all of us, I think, that a study needs to be done. The bottom line is the bottom line, and we're going to lose a lot of revenue unless we move forward. I know it's a risky proposition. I know it's political. And right leadership, to what Stan said, sometimes is uncomfortable. But I like the process. The discussion's been great. We need to move this forward. I don't know anybody in here that has said anything that would indicate otherwise, but I would recommend that we move forward and vote to move forward in the study. What that looks like, none of us know at this point. We all know that we're going to be losing considerable amounts of revenue, as a result of the EVs and kind of the new way of transportation. We can't wait to figure out how we're going to manage that. I think we need to move forward right away.
Great discussion. Any other comments from around the table? All right, we have two separate motions. The first proposed motion is to approve the 2020 legislative themes as you presented last month. And then it's back on attachment 1. Is there a motion? So moved from Mr. Elsner. Second from Kami. Discussion. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All right. Our legislative themes are approved. Second proposed motion is to approve the PPACG board. Let me suggest a change to that. Approve PPACG board support for a study of a road usage charge system as outlined in attachment 2.
So moved.
The motion from Mr. Davis and a second from Mr. Wilson. Discussion. Good discussion so far. Any further discussion? All those in favor of supporting a road usage charge study, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. 1 nay. That passes.
No, Mr. Chairman.
Yes.
It has been the position of the PPACG that when it comes to legislative issues, it requires a unanimous vote of the board, as much as that pains me to say that.
Okay. All right.
But it does require a unanimous position.
Point of order? All right.
And I'll concur with that. We had taken that position last year. We thought it was very important to take that position, again, as much as it pains me as well. But I can make the point that if it ends up not being the position of the PPACG board, all of the public agencies that are members of the board can pursue this separately through their own boards, and there can still be a coalition there. It just would not be a PPACG position.
Okay. All right. The point of order taken, Sharon.
If that is the position we're going to take, I would like to ask Jessica to ask Lauren to look for any bills that we could potentially add this on as an amendment to, or speak to the bill sponsor about,
All right. Well, if that's most of the board, yes, Andy.
Yeah, as I've said, it pains me to say so, but that has been the policy of the board since I was the chair.
Okay.
Way back when. So it has been the policy for a good 4 years. If one member objects, we don't take it as a PPACG position.
Okay. That means this board, the entire bill. Yes, Ken.
If I might offer a suggestion, what I'd be comfortable with is including language that said study charging electric vehicles, but not limited to study those vehicles, and not limited to, meaning to give the opportunity to have a broader conversation as opposed to just limiting it to the conversation of charging electric vehicles.
Right.
And that allows the folks that are studying that to have the appropriate
Going to
conversation.
be my next step is there an alternative motion to the one that would, as by point of order, failed? Dick?
I was just going to say, if that was a motion, I would second that.
All right. Would you state the motion once again, Ken?
Well, I don't have the language in front of me of the study, but it would be to include language in the study to suggest that we would study the opportunity to charge electric vehicles and or other opportunities, ... I don't know what that is, but just not limit it wherever electric vehicles, the language is to include, but not limited to.
Okay.
And if I had the language of the study, I could give you better exact language. Unfortunately, I don't.
Well, let's see. I do have the language. Andy?
Well, just to kill it, I will not support that, so that will be a split vote again.
Well, I agree. And I would not support that because it's too broadly stated, and I think that already died last year because of that. And I'm not going, I would not support trying to go down the same path. I think what we proposed is a very limited study, which opens the door, and that's what I would support now. Bringing equity up, not taking the broader view.
So I have the proposed bill title. It's 7 lines long, A proposed bill title concerning means of addressing long-term transportation. This is actual this is how bill titles are described. Many of them are exactly this form. Concerning means of addressing long-term transportation funding needs through a road usage charge benefiting the public transportation system provided by the Department of Transportation for transportation improvements, maintenance, operations, and in connection therewith, requiring the Department of Transportation to convene and consult with industry and stakeholder groups to determine the means and viability of measuring and assessing a road usage charge on each motor vehicle that relies on non-fossil fuel motor for any portion of its propulsion, and report findings and make recommendations to the General Assembly, thereby making an appropriation. Does that bill title? It does not even say electric vehicle. The term used is assessing a road usage charge on each motor vehicle that relies on a non-fossil fuel motor for its portion of propulsion, for any portion of the propulsion. That's the language our study has proposed. It's in the hands now of several agencies, state agencies, and legislators. Does that language fit?
It doesn't sound like, if there are those that wouldn't support a broader version of it, I'm not supportive of this version of it. It doesn't sound like we have a compromise in the making. I'm certainly willing to look at that. I absolutely agree we need to study transportation funding, but it doesn't sound like we're going to come to some agreement here if there are those that don't want a broader study.
Well, this goes back to Cammie's earlier point, and why hasn't anybody done this before? This is why. Because there is not agreement on how this should be done. It is groundbreaking.
And there was an attempt last year to do the broader study, and it failed. It won't, I don't think it'll get there.
Well, the fact that it failed last year, Stan, that wouldn't, to me, mean that we shouldn't try it again. Obviously, a change in legislature, a change in focus, maybe there's a change in priorities and so forth.
Legislators in their same seat this year. It's the second year of one session.
Okay.
I don't disagree with your point, Ken, but it did fail last year, so this is an attempt to figure out how to go forward and get at least some stuff done.
Yeah, part of my concern is that, El Paso County has a certain reputation as being fairly conservative, and I'm concerned that, we start taking on electric vehicles, and this is what it's going to be looking like. It's not going to be an equity issue. It's going to be, what do we want to do to those who drive electric vehicles? I don't think that's the image that El Paso County wants in the state. I think we want to support all forms of transportation, electric vehicles and otherwise, and so I'm concerned that this just is too narrow and will box us in and perhaps give us a reputation that we don't necessarily want to promote.
Jessica and then Dick.
So, one of the things that was discussed that hasn't been brought up yet, our lobbyist Lauren Furman has a lot of relationships with the Denver Mayor's Caucus as well. They are very well known for being pro-electric vehicle and for being pro-alternatives to the current funding systems. Her work as our lobbyist would include building those coalitions across the state, and part of her plan already is to approach potential sponsors that would not be El Paso County, Park County, or Teller County legislators. She has proposed that if we go forward with this, that we would need sponsors from a variety of places and a variety of perspectives, so that we are ensuring the bill is not focused as an anti or pro opinion, but also allow us to address the number one concern of road usage charge in general, whether it be for all vehicles or electric or in its existence, which is the security of data. Once that information is on hand, the lobbyist and other transportation professionals have said that that may be the step we need. That's the missing block of information, was what I gathered from our conversations, but specifically with Lauren.
Yeah. Mayor?
Yeah, I just don't understand, Andy. I really appreciate your opinion. Tell me why not on the broader issue? Why wouldn't that be a good start? I know it's not been supported or wasn't supported last year. It just seems like a good start for me. If we don't start there, where do we start?
The issue is that gasoline-powered vehicles are already paying their fair share. They're already on there. They're paying
And
on
it's a
something.
taxation that's been accepted.
It is a taxation that's already out there. They're already tolled in, if you want to use that term. And so the idea of replacing it is something that which was proposed last year. It failed and went nowhere. If that's the way it goes forward, I predict it would fail again. For precisely those reasons. It's already being paid, gasoline taxes are already being collected, and you have on top of that the issues which may even kill an electric study, which is the privacy issues. But we don't know unless we go down that way. But that's fundamentally the reason. It will not go anywhere because you're talking about hitting people who are already paying the tax.
Thank you.
Our lobbyist, Lauren Furman, did indicate that she is not comfortable with moving this board forward or finding sponsors without the endorsement of this board. So without a unanimous support of the board, I think it's dead. Unless individual member entities of PPACG want to take them one at a time through your own lobbyist effort, maybe through, I don't know, through our convening method, we could perhaps take up the issue and kind of help build consensus. That's kind of yet to be done, but.
And one other option, Mr. Chair, is maybe schedule this for discussion. I think the next legislative committee meeting is January 13th. We've got 2 meetings scheduled for January, so maybe bring it back up then, and maybe in the meantime, we can do some research to see what other coalitions out there might be interested in taking this on, so we can do some research around that and bring it back for discussion.
By 13 January, the legislature will be in session for a full week.
It gets a little late.
All the bills will be every bill table will be full. Every legislature will have a full pocket full of things they're working on, and there probably won't be any space in anybody's docket. But so Lauren did also make clear the fairly narrow window remaining for introducing of new legislation. Yep. Kenny, yes, ma'am.
My heart is pounding loudly because I don't usually speak out like this, but I have to say I'm a little bit disappointed in our inability. I would have probably supported either motion as well. So I am a little bit disappointed in realizing that our real effectiveness in the legislative world at all probably does depend on making some bold steps like this. And I mean, I absolutely understand why our lobbyist doesn't want to go forward if it's not a unanimous decision, and I think that's the right thing to do if we have one person that does not want to support one or the other. But I just have to say, I think maybe we all need to take a look at whether we kind of just self-neutered our own board. Whether we are doing what we're here to do without being willing to take bold steps or to make some compromises, but either way to make sure that our voice is heard at the state capitol, because we kind of maybe just took it away on this issue a little bit as a body. And I think there are other ways for us to proceed if we decide one of these is effective or not, but I apologize in advance if I've just stepped on somebody's toes, but we're
all friends here.
I'm disappointed that we can't come to one conclusion or another to make our voice heard in Denver.
Mr. Chair?
Yes.
I was not aware of the policy of the board. I did not vote with the intention to block it. I vote with the intention of expressing my opinion that it should be a broader study, an equitable study. So I certainly had no objection if the board would like to move forward. Again, I was not aware that one vote would block it. It was to recognize my objections and hopefully change the approach to it, not necessarily to block the vote. I was not aware that that was the policy.
Is that a motion to reconsider the vote?
Yes, I would reconsider it,
Okay.
and I will remain with my negative vote, but, well, I guess I can't do that unless we change the policy.
We'd have to change the policy then, or, oh yeah, what about it?
I would agree to abstain. Again, I was not meaning to block it, I just wanted to express my objection and a different direction to it, not that we shouldn't do the study. It's great.
Mr. Mayor, you're a powerful person, yeah. Very so.
But I would move to reconsider.
Okay, we have a motion to reconsider. Is there a second to move to a motion to reconsider? A second. We have to vote on the motion to reconsider. All those in favor of reconsidering the last vote, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. All right, we'll now put the matter back on the table. Further discussion first, Andy, and then Dick.
Yeah, that policy has been in place for about 4 years, but it's been kind of an informal policy, and the point of it was that we didn't have our member entities locked in conflict over a controversial issue. And that came up in the past, and that's kind of how we said, as a board, we wanted to make sure that our voice was at least consistent. We didn't want to have the voice of the PPACG and then pick a town screaming to high heaven in the contrary. And there has been a very controversial issue in the past that we intentionally walked away from for precisely that reason.
Communities working together.
Working together, that's right. So it is an informal policy, but I think it's a very good policy to take forward. And I just wanted to clarify how that policy was. It has been informal, but it's been one we've adhered to.
All right, motion is back on the table then. What is the proposed motion to be made? Dick?
Well,
Or Dick? Go ahead.
the motion would be to approve what we have. The one thing I would want to say is all of your comments that you had, I'm sure when we meet again with our lobbyists, we'll be passing that along. When you start trying to get a study, yes, we have the language, but trying to get someone to sponsor it for us, they may have those same concerns, and at that point, we'll have the discussion, and once the legislator decides that they're going to do it, it's all in their hands as to how they write it. I think our thing is we need to really push to have them start the study, and then there'll probably be some compromising along the way to try to get a study that might be approved.
Yeah, and by study, there's a lot of data out there. CDOT has years of data from lots of different data points. This was a major contract study. So this is almost a meta study, a study of a study to analyze the data and then fill in some gaps, perhaps with maybe additional surveys, and then make some conclusions about data security, and analysis of technology available, and perhaps propose policies for how that data would be accessed. All right. So the motion is back on the table to help me, Jessica.
Well, I don't think there's been a motion to revote.
Mr. Dick also made the motion to. Yeah, the original motion to approve the.
The motion to remove was made by Ken, supported by Dawn, and then that passed unanimously, so we are now.
No, that was a motion to reconsider.
Yeah.
We then voted to reconsider it. It's now, we're going to reconsider the vote of a motion to. So what is.
Dick made a motion, we don't have a second yet.
Yeah, I made the motion to approve the study and the language and move it forward. I think Jessica has the exact language.
Okay, and is there a second? And there is a second. Is there further discussion? All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
And ask for abstain.
That passes
Oh, no,
unanimously.
ask for abstain, ask for abstain.
And one extension noted, abstention noted. Okay, we have our direction to lobbyists, and thank you very much. Appreciate all that great discussion. Mr. Ellsner?
Yeah, there's a couple more things we needed to bring up on the legislative committee. January 13th and January 27th will be our next two meetings, 8:30 in the morning. If you would care to join, the legislative committee is open to anybody that wants to sit in. It's lively and fun, and the more people involved, I think the better off we are. But get a hold of Jessica on that. The other thing that we've talked about is we've got two meetings in January. Legislation is just getting rolling. By the time February rolls around, We will be planning on having a weekly meeting to go over all of the new legislation. Typically, we will bring it back to this board for approval, but that doesn't, once a month does not usually cut it when you get down into what the legislature's doing. So we're going to be bringing back in January the proposal that as items come up and the legislative committee meets and we want to take a position, we would then send out a notice to everybody on the board as to the issue, the position we would like to take, and why we would want to take it. And then we would ask for either, you send back saying, yes, go ahead, or no, don't go ahead. We would assume your silence would be, we'll go ahead. So if you do oppose what the legislative committee would like to do, please let us know as soon as you can. But that way, we can keep our lobbyists more involved and we can try to head off things earlier on rather than waiting to the end and you get down to some of the committees and the final votes, because that's when it gets really, really difficult. Let's see, there was some other thought that I had in my brain, but it just quickly escaped, so I think I'll leave it at that. Oh, I know what the other one was. We also, in our themes, we have a position that we will discourage or don't want any unfunded mandates. I think I would like to have this board, and again, this will probably be in January where we could vote on it, but I would like this board to take a stronger position than just, hey, here it is. I think we need to do a letter to our legislators and friends of our legislators and anybody up there that would listen, and maybe even to the governor, that says that unfunded mandates are not something that counties and municipalities can live with, that our budgets are all stressed just as they are right now, and for the state to come along and say, hey, we think this is a really good program, but we don't want to pay for it, so you have to pay for it, I think is totally unacceptable, and I think this board should take a stronger position on that. Thank you.
Stan?
And I appreciate Dick's comments on that. I concur wholeheartedly with the unfunded mandates issue, and that, to me, that's not a partisan issue. That's what, whoever you are, if you're just told, you have to place part of your planned budget against something that the legislature brings down, that becomes very difficult for all of us to do. So I would have an interest in us taking a little bit stronger position on that in concurrence with what Dick said. But then one last point. I think last year we did a legislative breakfast, and we went up to the Capitol, and most of us participated, and our feedback from that event was really good from the legislators, because we brought our themes pamphlet with us, and it was an opportunity for all of us to speak to our legislators. So I think the legislative committee has an interest in doing that again, and we probably need to figure out when to get that scheduled. And I don't know if there's proposed dates yet or not.
We'll be working with our legislators for locations soon.
Okay, and will we be doing that? I suppose we'll probably do that in January?
Normally, for when we set the date or when we do it?
For when the date would be?
January.
Okay, thank you.
And
so please anticipate that there'll be a date coming forward about going up to the Capitol, meeting with our legislators, bringing our themes with us, having breakfast with them, and having the conversations with regard to PPACG concerns. And again, the feedback last year was awesome on that, so thanks.
Okay. Yes, Jessica.
I'm so sorry to chime back in. The board actually did vote earlier this year to allow the legislative committee to send positions to the board via email, request approval or opposition within 24 hours. It was concluded that non-response meant consent, and that way we were able to give direction to our lobbyist. That was not specified in the motion we made by the board, that was only for the end of session. The board did approve that as the legislative committee process and did not add a caveat to that, so that may already be in place.
I would just ask, make sure that's compliance with state sunshine laws. A vote of a public board without public input. Yeah, so maybe you could confirm that is permissible under state law. Sure?
I To go back on what Commissioner Elsner said, I really like the idea of us as a board potentially writing a letter, stressing the unfunded mandate. My only concern is I think it's something we might need to bring to the board at the January meeting. So the sooner we can send it, the better. If the legislative committee is not meeting until the 13th, we actually, because January 1st falls on a Wednesday, the board will actually meet before we have our first legislative meeting. So is that something that we might want to consider ahead of time so that we have it so the board can vote on it?
I believe that is something we should have ahead of time so the board can vote on it.
Okay.
I think, if Jessica would draft it or Andy would draft it for us, and then we can send it to the legislative committee and we all can take a look at it and make sure we're happy with it, and then put it on the January agenda.
Okay, thank you.
Good stuff. All right, item 6C, action, approval of performance evaluation for our executive director. Barbara.
Good morning, Barb Watson, HR Manager, PPACG. So I sent an email to each of you with the with the memo in the board packet, but also with 2 versions of the evaluation form. And I have copies for anybody who needs them. I may not have sent it to you because I didn't have you on the list, Trustee Fast. So did you get a copy? Okay, great. So what I am hoping for today is to get your approval on one of the versions. And if there's no questions, I'd like to turn it over to the chair. Yes, if anybody needs copies, let me know.
At our executive session, and I can share some details, I guess, it was not public, but there was a proposal made for not only a wage increase, but also a one-time additional, what's the term, bump? I mean,
Salary increase?
Salary increase plus a
bonus.
A bonus, thank you. That was proposed in the executive session. After talking with our executive director, there was some back and forth, and he made a counter proposal. I think it was a very great proposal. Thank you, Andy, for your consideration. Was to reduce the amount of the bonus, and increase slightly the amount of annual leave in a one-time basis. Andy works, those you don't know, Andy works very hard. I mean, he's usually the first one in the building and probably the last one that turned the lights out. He's also, true to his character, is a strong family and connection, and his family all over the country. And we'd like to exercise through additional little extended leave policy, 3 days, we're proposing. And that would be a counter proposal. So 2 versions of the letter. One is to approve the original compensation package, bonus package proposed in our executive session. A second letter would be to accept Mr. Gunning's counter proposal to reduce the bonus and increase his leave. Andy?
Can we call that one option B?
Option B?
If so, so moved.
Option B has been moved.
Second.
Any discussion?
One point of discussion is, in approving option B, which I do agree with, it says contribution of 24 hours will be made to his vacation balance. Is that to be used in 2020?
That is, we have a vacation pool, and the vacation pool, it's a little bit complicated. Anyway, it's not to be used by a certain time. You reach an accrual cap, and you cannot go above that. So it's not, you can't say to be used in 2019 or to be used in 2020. So it'll be used as he uses his vacation.
I just want to make sure we all understand what we're doing exactly. So
Yeah, so adding 24 hours to his leave, 3 days, work days, and
Right.
reducing his
Which I have no
compensation
problem with,
bonus.
yeah.
So,
Okay.
yeah. Gary?
Do we have a PTO program, paid time off program, or is it separated out into vacation, sick time, et cetera?
We have a vacation and a sick time
Okay.
policies.
Stan?
And thank you, Mr. Chair. And one of the other questions I had with regard to this approach, some leave in lieu of a bonus was how does that translate into following years? And basically, for everybody's benefit and understanding here, this is a one-time approach, and it would have to be readdressed next year. But the current PPACG policies regarding these remain in effect. This in no way modifies those. So this is a one-time approach, and next year we would have to go through the conversation again if Mr. Gunning has a similar interest. Thank you.
Any other questions? We have a motion. We have a motion and a second. Discussion. All those in favor of option B, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. That passes. Thank you, Barb.
Thank you.
And Andy, thank you. All right. Move on to reports. Gentlemen, thank you for your patience. We're now 11:15 almost. Military installations. Ron, would you start us off, please?
Absolutely. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Board members, thanks for the opportunity to comment. In the interest of time, I'll just mention a couple of things briefly. First, we held our quarterly based exercise the 19th through the 21st of November. The focus was on natural disaster recovery and active shooter responses. Certainly, the recent events at Pearl Harbor and Pensacola highlight the need to be ready in that dangerous area. So we did have a successful exercise of looking at that specifically. Last week, Colonel Jack Fisher, our 50th Space Wing Vice Commander, participated in a panel at the Colorado Space Business Roundtable discussing human space exploration as well as the need for STEM and scientific literacy to make our students eligible to be part of the emerging space economy. So that was a great way to contribute his experience to that discussion. And finally, on the 14th of November, I attended the joint MAC and Aurora Defense Council meeting. It was both informative and beneficial. Certainly, one highlight for us is we appreciate the community's support and advocacy for our military personnel and installations. So subject to your questions, that's all I have to report this month.
Questions? No. Thank you very much. Colonel Johnson?
Morning, everybody. Just to jump off on one of his points, we have a monthly law enforcement meeting with all the LE entities in town, including the sheriff and the city police. It's a really good meeting, information sharing, and we kind of rotate between facilities or between bases and downtown. And so we are, on his point, we're continually looking for more opportunities to exercise those kinds of scenarios. And so we really appreciate the partnership and support with the Colorado Springs Police Department, El Paso County Sheriff, and state patrols there, so a lot of organizations. So it's really awesome to get everybody together to talk. One thing we continue to talk about is our safe and reliable access to base, and I appreciate the city's efforts to plow all the snow that we've had so far this year. And we also have been trying to keep in touch with all the other bases and other organizations when we make snow calls and those kinds of things, so I appreciate that partnership there. So for that, one thing, we talk about the gate access for all of our gates at Peterson. So we have a traffic study that we've been doing at the North Gate. So we're kind of wrapping up. We've collected all the data. We're kind of wrapping up that study. And so as soon as the information is kind of collated, we'll share that with you all for the Department of Transportation, all the city planners. And then, of course, I know the big thing that on everybody's mind is the NDAA. No? So it's on our mind. So if you watch the news in between the hearings or whatever else is going on in the country, the NDAA is getting close to passing. It came out of common language out of the committees, and the reason that we've been watching it is because it does include language for a Space Force. And so we are hearing that they may vote on that sometime next week. So sometime next week you may see the beginnings of a Space Force stand up. It's initially going to be part of the Air Force, subbed underneath the Air Force, kind of similar to the Marine Corps and the Navy. At least the language I saw initially, it's only going to include Air Force entities. So we'll see what happens with other services in the NRO, sometime in the future. Your prediction is as good as mine. So we'll see, but that's a big deal for us, and the many changes, but definitely Peterson is not shrinking. Peterson continues to grow all the time. And this is completely unrelated to U.S. Space Command basing decision or the Space Force.
Peterson is a popular place. We continue to have requests for people to flow in for SMC and other organizations to continue to bring people to Colorado Springs. And so I think that's just a testament to how nice a place this is to live, and everybody's, the governments, y'all make it a nice place to live and work for everybody, so that's why we continually bring people in. So that's big news that it's happening at Peterson and Space Command, and that's all I have. Pass it on to Rob.
Okay. Carl Baird, welcome.
Thank you. Good morning, Mr. Chair, members of the board. 2 quick updates from the United States Air Force Academy today. One, just informational finals are this week, so our cadets will be leaving this weekend for a well-earned holiday break. They'll be on break 14 December to 5 January. The other big thing in the news for us, obviously, is that your Falcons are going to the Cheez-It Bowl in Phoenix, Arizona. So they are excited about that. So they're playing on the 27th of December at 8:15 in the evening. That will be on ESPN. And out of the Mountain West, only us and Boise State are playing Power 5 conferences in the bowl. So we're pretty excited. We got to play up a bowl this year. And this is the first time in 2 decades that your Falcons have ended the year in the top 25 AP polls. So very excited about that and the momentum that means for us and the community going into next year. Pending your questions, that's all from your academy.
What does that mean, play up a bowl?
So
I'm going to show my soul ignorance.
The conferences have conference tie-ins where you expect to go. So a bowl we would have expected to go would have likely been like the Armed Forces Bowl because of the way other teams moved up in bowls. It allowed us to play in a bowl that we otherwise wouldn't have. It is. Yeah, it's a higher profile event for us. Means more advertising, more exposure.
That thought went through my mind, but I wasn't going to say it.
Okay.
So I figured the Cheez-Its come after the game. So, yeah.
Probably, yeah. Good. Stan?
Yes. And congratulations for that, for the sports prowess of the Air Force Academy. But there is some other news that I think it would be appropriate to share with this board, and that's the findings from the PFOS-PFOA, if you might relay that.
Yes, certainly. Thank you so much. So last month, the validated results from the PFOS-PFOA study, or from the test results from the wells came back. And so those went back out to the residents, and we had a public affairs release that went out locally. And in all cases, they were below the lifetime health advisory limit, and in most cases, all but 3, they were undetectable. So the levels were very good, very encouraging. Now, the new wells that are in along our border remain in place, and we will continue to monitor those. But the indications that we get from this is that the chemical has not moved off the academy, and those wells will allow us to continue to monitor for that and ensure the safety of the local community. So thank you so much for bringing that up, sir. I forgot between last month and this month to brief that. Thank you.
Okay.
Such exciting good news.
Great news.
Right.
We're there.
Keith, anything from the chamber?
Yeah, that's what it is.
Mac?
Yes, I'm sitting in for Terry Storm. Well, actually, Terry is retired. Please thank him for his service to the community if you see him out and about, although he is promising to keep a very low profile. So I don't have any other issues. We're tracking many of the things that have been mentioned. Of course, we're dividing and conquering, going to conferences all over the country, trying to keep up with these issues and reporting back internally. But lots of goodness going on in this sector. We appreciate our bases very much and all of the community support that rallies behind them. But I don't have anything else. We're not certain who the permanent replacement for Terry on the PPACG is going to be from the Military Affairs Council. Maybe me or maybe someone else. More to follow. Thank you.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Yes, sir. Mr. Chair, members of the board, Brandy couldn't make it. She asked me to fill in. Real quickly, the items that were discussed at the TAC meeting have been on your agenda today. So unless there's any additional questions from the memo, especially looking at the time, that would conclude my report.
Okay, questions from Technical Advisory Committee? Seeing none, move on to Community Advisory Committee. Jessica, reporting as staff.
Jessica McMullen, Policy and Communications. You did not have a CAC agenda because they just met last Wednesday on the 4th. They combined their November and December meetings. Major points from it: they did elect their new leadership positions for 2020. Their new chair will be Tim O'Donnell, first vice chair will be Aubrey Day, and second vice chair will be John DeVoe. We really wanted to send a thank you to those board members who came and attended their holiday shindig right afterwards. So very much thank you to everyone who stopped by. And then I just wanted to give a guilt face / come on people to City of Colorado Springs still has a vacancy, City of Victor has a vacancy, Teller County has a vacancy, Green Mountain Falls have a vacancy, Palmer Lake and Rama all have vacancies. So
I think we just filled ours.
I haven't been told yet.
Well, we're working on it. We're working.
All right. Haven't crossed the finish line yet. All right, Mobility Coordinating Committee. Gail, do you have, no report from Mobility?
I'm on it. We were closed due to the snow day.
All right, so no report from Mobility Coordinating. Regional Advisory Council, Mr. Barker.
Good morning, Jody Barker, AAA Director, stepping in for Dave Betzler, Chair. He actually is off officially now as Chair. He has one more year on the Regional Advisory Committee, so he'll be shadowing with the new Chair in her position. That's Dixie Waddell out of Fountain Valley, so we appreciate her taking that position. We also recognized 3 who were leaving at the end of their terms and appointed new chairs as part of our meeting. You had asked and sent back a vote regarding carryover. Per your request, per this board's request for action, the staff and the executive committee of the Regional Advisory Committee have already put motions in place where the requests and the budget planning is already in the hands of our providers right now. They'll have that due to us. We're expediting the process so that while we are waiting on the state option letter for those federal carryover fund dollars, we can go ahead and get processes in place sooner rather than later, so that as soon as we do have that option letter, we can expedite getting those funds out to the community. So thank you very much. We are looking at other ways to expedite some of those funding opportunities. Depending on the time frame, we may be asking for a conditional vote at next board meeting. We will add that to the agenda and the packet if necessary. Thank you very much.
Good. CDOT monthly update. Karen, do you have something for us?
Not too much. We had a lot of CDOT topics today, but we're going to do a build grant recipient celebration with Gardner's office. However, it got snowed out. That was the Tuesday of Thanksgiving. I don't think we're going to reschedule that. We'll probably just wait until we do some groundbreaking. So right now, that's the word I've heard. This time of year, it's always hard to schedule those things. But yeah, we're proceeding on designing and scheduling the improvements on 94 and I-25 and working with El Paso County on their improvements in line with that build grant, as well as the IGA that will be needed to move those forward. We did have some bids open in PPACG area that I'm excited about. US 24 East near Peyton, passing lanes. Bids all came in under budget. And then State Highway 94 at Peyton Road, we have intersection safety improvements that the bids came in and they were good. So I'll tell you more in January. We'll be advertising the paving that continues the State Highway 24 to the west paving project. And ramp metering's continuing and should be done by this spring for along I-25 in Colorado Springs. If you have any questions, let me know.
Stan?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you for the update. Great things going on in CDOT on some challenges that we have in the county, and particularly pleased with the paving of 24, the west, and some of the I think you're extending some of the exit lanes and things like that, and all of that. But I do have a question with regard to the broadband that's going up Ute Pass. I just don't know what the latest status, if that's actually completed now, or is it still ongoing?
Fiber lay, I believe, was completed by the,
Yeah, that's the fiber optic.
You know, I don't have a status on that. I'm looking a little bit to Jennifer because I know that was a partnership project. I think it may.
Is it completed? I just never heard anything about whether it was completed or not.
And I don't know if it's operational yet. So there's it's installed, and then there's we have it up and running. So again, not as an excuse, but that's part of our ITS group at headquarters, and so I'll ask them what the status is and get back to you on that.
And for everybody else's benefit, we built a partnership with CDOT, and we're able to put El Paso County fiber optic into CDOT's pipe, and there are plans to get that pushed out to the Cripple Creek area, so that the 4th Judicial District offices up there can have their broadband. Also, there's plans to lay a connection into Green Mountain Falls, their law enforcement office, so that Green Mountain Falls law enforcement, as well as El Paso County Sheriff's Office law enforcement, can use broadband in there. And this project was also beneficial to the town of Manitou Springs, because that has allowed Manitou Springs to do a lot of their own work in getting broadband into Manitou Springs. So I just want to make the point, this is an example of excellent partnering with several public agencies, and I'm just appreciative that we were able to go forward with it. So thanks.
yeah. Certainly echo that, having been part of that negotiation as well, personally. All right. Both Andy Pico and I were not able to attend the last STAC meeting due to other either state or local conflicts. John Leosados attended STAC for us.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the board. And I was there for TPR number 1, Pikes Peak, and Commissioner Elsner was there for Central Front Range, TPR 14. So anything I miss, Commissioner, please feel free to jump in. The meeting consisted of a couple of items, but I think the two things that are most important to you is, as last month the STAC talked about roadway projects, and one of the recommendations out of that was our recommendation that the Powers and Research intersection be a priority. That went to the Colorado Transportation Commission and was approved. This month they talked about the transit recommendations. I think the high-ticket item, or the big item of interest for this region, is the facility at Powers in Beju, and that will allow that to move forward. Is that correct, Karen? Anything else we want to add there? That was one of the main topics of conversation. And then the other thing was there was a update by Rebecca White on the statewide transportation plan, which is now winding down. Mr. Elsner, anything else you'd like to add?
No, it was a pretty generic meeting. On the mobility side, we approved that. I think it's a 5-year plan. I was encouraged because Fairplay was listed as one of the projects, not this coming year, but the next year. So you never know if it'll be in 3 years or 4 years. But it was a transit facility in Fairplay to service Mustang routes that are going through, that I know Gunnison County is trying to increase the number of buses going through the area, and then also in conjunction with a place for the Summit Stage to have a stop inside Fairplay.
I think, Karen, you were going for the button.
Yeah, just for clarification, at Platten Powers off of Troy Hill, we're building a facility on Bijou Street. So it's just at Platten Powers in the southwest corner. We're building a new CDOT maintenance facility, which will help our maintenance snowplow drivers be closer to the roads that they're plowing. So I think it'll really help Schriever and Peterson Air Force Base, because right now they come all the way from I-25 and commercial, like on the south end. But by the end of next summer or possibly fall, we'll have all our plows there at that intersection. So for the roads that service 94 and Powers, right now we only have 2 patrols up on 83 that kind of really service the north end. And then on that same site, we're going to have the Bustang maintenance facility, so it'll house all the Bustang buses. So right now, they're kind of out in the elements, so they, it's not good when you got to get them started in the morning to have to clear them off with all the snow.
Because they have that snow smell to them.
That's at Platten Powers, did you say?
Yeah, it's in the southwest corner. You can see the property there now. There's mag tanks and some millings. Also, Joe Gabler's not here, but CDOT is starting a snow staying service, which is busing to the mountains. It starts at Union Station and then the Federal Center on the west side of Denver, and it goes to Arapahoe Basin and Loveland. I think there's 3 runs Saturday and Sunday morning, and 3 runs back, as well as one to Steamboat. We had tried this before, but we did it without supplementing the fares in the past, and it was rather expensive. So now it's rather reasonable, and again, the idea is to get cars off the road, right? So if we can get them in the buses and get them up on I-70, that'll help reduce the impact to I-70. So it's $25 round trip for the Arapahoe and Loveland, and it's $40 round trip to Steamboat. So that's a new service starting this weekend. It should be on the website. It should be in our app now. And again, maybe not a lot of people here would utilize it, but if you know people, or if you are going up to Denver and would want to take those services.
Executive Director's report.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, just a couple of items, real brief. I'll try to be pretty short. Spinning off the stack update that John just gave, if you'll recall, stack meetings are going to be changed in 2020 to the second Friday of each month. We were concerned about conflicts that would have with work sessions, workshops that we hold, that the board has in advance of our regular meetings. And looking at the schedule, really only conflicts with 3 dates. First one's in May, so we're going to keep the work session dates the same for the most part. As we get closer to where those conflicts are, then we'll zoom in and see if we can find some other dates that are going to work. But just wanted to close the loop there. We'll talk more about that maybe at our annual meeting in January that we have. One other item we're going to schedule for January, and just kind of an FYI, Jessica mentioned we have a need for CAC members. We also have a need for some air quality technical committee members on the air quality committee. So we're going to put that on the agenda for January. We're also looking at maybe expanding the membership, making sure we're getting the right stakeholders at the table. For instance, MMT is not really a formal member, and I think there maybe is a connection there where we should have our transit provider as an air quality rep. Now's a good time to zoom into those needs as well, since we're kind of on the slow side of ozone and air quality issues. We want to ramp up so we're ready for the summer season next year. Another item we're going to schedule, probably not in January necessarily, but in the first quarter of 2020, is we've had a lot of really good conversations around specialized transportation service. Some of our service providers are in the audience, and you heard from Jolene Helsman earlier today. But we coordinate AAA and fund AAA service to specialized transportation with entities like Envita, Silver Key, and Fountain Valley Senior Center. And I think I've mentioned before that we were approached by the city in looking at coordinating the other funds that go into specialized service through the PPRTA and also FTA grants that come to the region. So we've been having a lot of conversations with our service providers, with CDOT, with FTA. We're going to have a meeting with Dr. Cog in January because they're undergoing a similar transition where they're housing all those funded rides under their umbrella, and having a similar conversation here. So I want to bring that to the board and just kind of let you know where we are with that process. I know it came up at the CAC meeting last week, and a little bit of concern to make sure that it doesn't fall through the cracks, and it's not falling through the cracks, but we are planning on how that's going to look going forward. Last thing I'll mention is our office will be closed this Friday from 11 o'clock to the rest of the day for an annual holiday party that we're going to have to thank our staff for all the excellent work they've done over the past year. So if you're trying to reach us Friday from 11 on, we'll be out of touch. Actually, one last thing real quick. I want to thank you, Mr. Chair, for all your support, all your encouragement. This is most likely your last meeting you're going to chair when we have elections in January. But I really want to thank you for your encouragement and support, especially for me personally, in getting me up to speed and oriented around the region. So thank you very much. Appreciate that.
And that's kind of what we're all about, isn't it? Yeah. Okay, we'll move on to member any announcements. Quickly around the horn. Anybody have an issue? Ken, and then move around the table.
Did you have one in? Go ahead.
I just appreciated hearing all the great stuff from the Air Force Academy on their bowl games, and beat Army.
Oh, it's on.
Just real quick, a month or so ago, Manitou Springs passed an aggressive climate action plan. And in keeping with that, a couple weeks ago, we passed a resolution concerning the Commercial Property Assessed Clean Energy Program. We are encouraging El Paso County to consider, I know they have looked at that program. It would be great if this group might have some input or conversation about that, and whether El Paso, perhaps Teller counties might. There are 31 counties, I believe, now that are part of the program. We believe it's a viable program or another tool that we'd like to see in the county. So just wanted to bring that to the attention, perhaps have a conversation at some point next year. The board can talk about that, and perhaps with El Paso and the Teller counties, encourage the adoption of that program.
Okay, great. Maybe we can cue that up at a future date. Dick?
Yeah, I just, if anybody was watching the news over Thanksgiving, you noticed that we had a little bit of a snowstorm in Park County and in South Park. This is a picture that I provided everybody. I want to really thank the people of Fairplay. The news said we had somewhere around 746 people that were stranded. We got a more accurate count last night. The 746 were in our shelters. We had 54 that were at the Jefferson Como Fire Department, and if you're ever on the Elkhorn Road, you'll notice it's out in the middle of absolutely nowhere. And then we had, we think, another 200 that were at the motels. I mean, one of the motels said, they filled up, and then they let people sleep on the floor, in the lobby, in the hallways. It was just an absolutely amazing effort by the people of Fairplay to take care of over 1,000 people when you consider the town's only got about 780.
Wow.
So it was really amazing. I want to thank them. I also think, Jefferson County provided us with one of the track vehicles that we used. We had, 40 or 50 cars that were stranded that we had to go out and rescue people out of. Talking to a couple of the first responders last night, they said they went up to a couple of the cars and it was so frozen they could not get in the door. So they had to kind of chip away at the ice to get in to see if there was anybody they need to get out. I think it's absolutely amazing that no one was severely injured, and I think it's a testament to the people that live in South Park and their dedication to get everybody safe. Thank you.
Very good. Around the table, Bruce?
Yeah, just this Friday, Friday the 13th, Victor's going to have their annual Christmas parade of the lights. So if you're in the area, stop by. It should start around 5 o'clock. And then afterwards, we'll have bonfires in the plaza, and hot toddies are available.
Okay. Ooh. Okay. El Paso? Stan? Dick? Don? Okay. Something else?
Well, I thought we were just going down the line, so I wanted to give Tammy an opportunity, but...
She waved.
So just wanted to let everybody know we passed our 2020 budget yesterday. All right. And one last thing is, as far as road construction and so forth, we have done the ribbon cutting now for the West Colorado Area Action Plan. That's West Colorado Avenue. That's that piece of road that's between the city of Colorado Springs and the city of Manitou Springs. It really looks awesome. If you've stayed away from that area because of the construction, I recommend you go down and take a look at it. I think it's going to do an enormous amount to revitalize that area, and it really does look great. So in addition to a better road and more parking, it actually helps better connect the Midland Trail, the bike trail going through the area, and it has a new bus stop also in that area for people to get on and off buses. So there are definitely infrastructure components in that revitalization that relate to PPACG issues. Thanks.
No updates from Teller County. Just want to wish everybody a very Merry Christmas, Happy Hanukkah, all the best to you and those you love. We're adjourned. Yeah.
Congratulations on successfully navigating through it last year and actually succeeding in getting to your legislation that you wanted. That was interesting.
Well, what were we talking about? 45 minutes, I guess?
Yeah.
Yeah, it was.
But that's actually, we're stepping up.
Very